administrative staff recommendations. Oh, that's because I don't have a page 3 in my script.
Oh, adoption of the agenda.
Oh, that's because you have them out of order. You're just messing with me, Pam. Okay,
There is, you're right.
Okay, I'll turn the page. See what happens when there has a script? You guys can confuse me. That brings us to the adoption of the agenda, Dr. Bingley. I'll just rearrange my script.
Thank you, Ms. Nisi and members of the board. On this evening's agenda, we have administrative staff recommendations, 2 recognition items, 1 presentation, 27 consent items, and 11 information items. You also have the yellow supplemental agenda, which are changes made to the agenda since being released to the public. Administrative staff recommendations were added, and there is 1 consent revision, item F12, on student expulsions.
Okay, do I have a motion to adopt the May 12, 2015 school board meeting agenda and its revisions?
Motion to adopt.
Second.
Motion was made to approve by Mrs. Belford, seconded by Mr. Ziegler. Is there any further discussion? Please vote. Okay, motion carries unanimously. Now I'm on page 4, Dr. Bingley. Let's move on to the administrative staff recommendations.
And so am I. Ms. Nisi and members of the board, under item A7, you have 8 administrative staff recommendations to consider.
Wow, okay, well, I don't know if we should make them sweat or not, but what are the wishes of the board?
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion was made by Mrs. Belford, seconded by Mrs. Henderson. Is there any further discussion? Please vote.
I don't know, you're getting one of my best principles there, and then passing the EC.
I could say mine's not coming up. Oh, there it is. Wow. Long list. And that motion passes unanimously. That brings, are we pausing at that point or just move? Okay. That brings us to recognition of visitors, guests, or staff.
There are 2 recognition
Bless you.
items this evening. Item B8 is our Spotlight on Education segment, which shares many of the exciting, innovative, and excellent programs, activities, and projects that are happening in our schools. Featured this evening is Heritage High School, whose presentation will highlight the school's Sports Medicine Academy and how the program provides students with real, applicable, hands-on experience. So please welcome Academy Director Dr. Colin Turry and Heritage High Sports Medicine Academy students. Okay, Brooke, I'm going to do this the best I can. Brooke Bonaotu, Billy Hicks, Alyssa Herrera, and Perla Jimenez.
Good evening. The Sports Medicine Academy at Heritage High School is an academy that CTE provides and is under the Office of School Choice. We aim to emphasize medically and significantly relevant material for students who are planning a career in the health field. Students interested in sports med. It's a health and wellness program. We consider it a school within a school. These awesome students take Cambridge classes, prepare for the Certified Medical Administrative Assistant exam their senior year. They're also CPR, first aid, and AED certified during their sophomore year. The vision of our program is to provide a strong academic program with an emphasis on medically and scientifically relevant material for students planning to go into a variety of health fields. The student athletic trainers, these students here beside me have performed countless volunteer hours assisting our athletic teams. They'll be out there on the football field for practice. They'll be out there on the football field on Friday evenings supporting the team during games. They'll be in the basketball courts for our boys and girls basketball teams and all the other sports teams that we have at Heritage High School. These students are assisting in making sure that those students avoid injury as they participate. We also have what we call the STAR program at Heritage High School, which allows our Health and Wellness 1 students to work with some of our What's that? Well, our EMH students and our less fortunate students at developing more motor movement skills as well as social skills so that when they do leave Heritage High School, they're more equipped for society. They also belong to different health organizations like HOSA. They are involved with Kaiser University. We have a relationship with Kaiser here in Melbourne where the students can take internship hours in the summertime and explore different medical fields that Kaiser offers. And they're also a strong supporter of our Fuel Up to Play 60 grant that we are awarded this year. This is a picture of what our facility looks like. They did an amazing job designing the facility when Heritage High School was built 6 years ago. We have a strength training center, rehab center, cardio equipment, and of course a classroom and material storage. So we thank the board and for that, offering with our school. Here's a picture of some of our equipment. The academy classes, as I said, it's a progressive plan. It starts out in 9th grade and finishes in 12th. There's 3 core courses. Health Science 1, which is now Health Foundations for Anatomy and Physiology. The students take their 10th grade year. Health Science 2 is now Health Science Foundations, their junior year, and then their senior year is Health and Wellness 3. Those are the 3 core courses required for the students to take as electives to finish the academy certificate. Mixed in with that, we feel it's pertinent that they have electives that support those programs. We've added ACE PE this year, which makes us the second school in Florida to add that program. It's a Cambridge course that is very rigorous with exercise science and biomechanics as a core function of that course. Here's a picture of some of our students during blood drives. We perform 4 blood drives a year at the school, 1 per quarter, and we are on record as having the largest blood drive donations in the region. Here's some of our academy students at the University of North Florida. We do like to take our students out to explore different universities. At those universities, they get to experience what those universities have to offer in terms of facilities and academic programs within sports medicine and physical therapy. Here's our students at Palm Beach Atlantic University. And then we feel it's very strong to give back to our communities, so here's some of our students volunteering at Port Malabar Elementary during their aftercare programs. And anyone looking for additional information, there's my direct line. Thank you.
Very nice. Questions from the board? Andy?
So do they actually, you all actually get to work with or learn about sports injuries and how to solve them? I can see you have a rehab center, so you learn about rehab and can give advice on that kind of stuff. Is that what you learn about?
Okay, well, we're all in the sports medicine, like student athletic training club, where we actually work alongside our athletic trainer, Doc Luna, where we're with the football team on the side, learning how to tape injuries, to ice them, learning what to do if during a concussion and whatnot. So we're actually learning on-hand experience on what to do, when to do it, and how to perform it correctly so our client, like the athlete, doesn't get progressed injuries. So.
I may have to come talk to one of you. I've got this really tight ham that pulls through my glute, and I'm really not sure what to do about it. But anyways, well, that's excellent. That's great. Hands-on experience helping the teams. That's a great academy. I'm glad you're all doing well in it. Thank you for what you do.
Great. Dr. Binkley?
Well, they're very smart and talented, but they can't work magic, Mr. Ziegler.
That would take a...
But, yeah, and so you always start and end with cold, right? Isn't that how it works, maybe? Yeah? Well, I think you guys have a great opportunity. You've taken advantage of it. I know that if you had been around when Sheriff Ivey was wrestling, he'd probably feel better even to this day. So thank you for being here tonight, and we really appreciate you sharing this kind of program with us, and good luck. Thank you.
Oh, wait a minute. We had one more.
How many students are in your academy?
Currently, we're reaching over 250 students. That's 9th through 12th grade. Next year will be our largest senior roll-up in our Health Wellness 3 class. We'll have approximately 90 students.
It's wonderful.
Excellent. So you are keeping them
Yes.
as time goes on, so that's great.
Yes, ma'am.
And what year did this start?
When the school opened in
Yeah, I know. What year did that, was that?
2009, I believe.
Okay.
Great.
That's great. Thank you.
Great job. Thank you.
I'm sorry, Dr. Harris. It's a great day to be a Panther. I left that out. I'm sorry. Next, we have item B9, which is to present the annual Drug-Free Poster Contest Awards. Ms. Bridget Geiger, our K-12 Visual Arts resource teacher, will make the introductions.
Thank you, Dr. Bingley, school board members, and guests in attendance tonight. It is my pleasure to be here this evening as we recognize 3 very talented young artists for their creative planner cover designs illustrating important drug-free messages for their peers. Please welcome Brevard County State Attorney Mr. Phil Archer and Sheriff Wayne Ivey, who will give a brief overview of the Student Planner Drug-Free Crime Prevention Program and present the awards.
Mr. Ziegler, I just got to say before we start, I think they treat athletic injuries. It's not going to help you not being.
Are you insinuating something there, Mr. Sheriff? We go out to the mat, you know, and see who can do what.
Well, thank you for having us here tonight. And, you know, what a wonderful program. We have been doing this program since 1991. We started back with my predecessor, Norm Wolfinger, and Sheriff Miller started this as a way to reach out, trying to use the right message, but the right messengers. Because it's so important for kids to reach out to other kids. And so we really appreciate, we cannot do this without the help of the school system, the teachers, the principals that really help promote this program, get the kids involved. And as you can see from the artwork, maybe you saw it over here before he turned it around backwards on you, but incredible artwork by these kids. It's really hard to choose the winners because there's so many good ones. But, you know, about 2 years ago, when Sheriff Ivey came in, and the man has so many ideas 24/7, and said, you know, nobody really looks at calendars anymore. You know, kids, everything's on the cell phone now. Let's do something different. And so we put our heads together with Bridget and came up with the idea that, you know, even in today of electronics, there's one thing that every child in school has to have with them every day, and that's the school planner. And so it was a great way to keep our message out there so we know the kids are looking at it, we know the parents are looking at it, and so we switched over to the planners, and I think it's just a win-win, and I appreciate Sheriff Ivey's willing to, he pays for this program through forfeiture funds, and so it's a great way to give back to the community. I'm going to ask to Sheriff Ivey to kind of explain why it's such an important program.
Thank you, Phil. First of all, let me echo what Phil said, and that is thank you for partnering with us on this. It is a great opportunity for us to interact with our school-age children and try and deliver a very positive message that is so important in today's time. And, you know, I look at the very first poster right here, and all 3 of them are dynamic and have such a tremendous message. But the very first one is Life Without Drugs, Life with Drugs. And the pictures just really define what we try and tell everybody, and that is we have to get to our kids before they get to us out at that jail. Once they're there, they're in the system. They're a part of trying to fix rather than trying to stop from ever happening. And that's what this is all about. This is allowing the messenger to be the peers of the school, to have them be able to deliver a message that truly says how important it is to stay away from drugs. And I think it's a great idea, again, a great partnership, and knowing that the planners are with every kid, they're going to see it every day. And I know I personally have had a lot of kids come up to me and say, I saw the drawing, I saw the picture, and I'm staying away from drugs. And so we know it's working. It's something we are looking forward to continuing. And again, we just thank the board for allowing us to do this, and thank the kids for doing it. They're the ones that came up with what you see before you. So we really appreciate it.
And also, not only on top of the message, also inside those covers are very important messages. and phone numbers. So we have the speak out hotlines, we have the crisis hotlines, we have the sheriff's office, we have some of the important school numbers. So it's a way of giving not only the school children, but also their parents, those numbers that they can use in that planner. And we think that's very important on top of the message. So at this time, I'd like to ask Mr. Bingley and Ms. Canisi if you'd come down and join us here for a photograph with, as we call out each winner, so that they can, sure, if you want to walk over to see. We're going to do the first, we'll do this right here. And our, and also I wanted to, and on top of the award plaque that we're giving the winners tonight, we also have some gift cards from Andretti Thrill Park, Cobb Theaters, Dixie Crossroads, Goff and Gator, and Ron John Surf Shop. And I really appreciate them sponsoring and being involved in this as well. But our first winner from grades K through 2, that was the range, from Tropical Elementary, Miss Scarlett Fratton. Scarlett, come on up. Yeah, And I remiss in there that with that school, Principal Samantha Allison and art teacher Miss Sandy Brooker. And that, again, a special thanks to those teachers and the principals, because without their leadership, without them committing their time to these programs, they wouldn't work. So thank you very much. The second winner in grades 3 through 6 from Fairglen Elementary, with Principal Misty Robinson and art teacher Miss Angela Thomas. Please welcome our winner, Miss Haley Cheyenne Summerlin. Okay, and our final winner in grades 7 through 8 from Southwest Middle School, Principal Todd Scherer, and art teacher Mrs. Janet Tucker, Miss Victoria Rios. believe we're going to ask the winners to, if they want to take their posters home with them, I believe, yeah? And because that'll be another nice memento for them to take home. And again, we really appreciate the school board, the school system, the teachers, and most of all, the parents and the children involved. Thank you all very much. Appreciate it.
Mr. Archer. I was curious. There's a good idea to put it on the planner, but I wonder if maybe the next time we could, maybe there's an app for that, you know? Maybe we could put it on their phones and all along with the student conduct guides and all of that other kind of stuff. Maybe you all can work on that.
I'm slowly buying into that whole technology thing, so I'm moving that way. So,
Excellent.
So thank you. Thank you.
Would you commit me to?
You're developing an app, Sheriff.
That's right.
No, actually, Lindsay's developing.
Yeah, I was going to say. Okay, Dr. Bingley?
Thank you. As there are no resolutions or proclamations, Ms. Nisi and members of the board, we have one presentation on tonight's agenda. Judy Preston, Associate Superintendent of Financial Services, will present a brief budget update, and given what's happened in the legislature, it will be really brief.
Good evening.
I don't have one.
As Dr. Bingley said, this will be extremely brief. Normally at this time of the year, we would be standing here with some kind of an idea about where the legislature was in terms of adopting a budget and what its impact would be on us. And we're not quite there. So I thought maybe I should talk about it in some broad terms. So the good, the bad, and the unknown at this particular point in time. There is some good news. The good news being the fact that we are actually turned the corner in our enrollment and we are growing, finally. We are no longer declining. We are actually growing. Now, the board is familiar with this particular chart, but our community has not been. Basically, what this does is goes back to 2007-8, and it shows month-to-month progression throughout the course of the year as we measure our student enrollment each particular month. You can see, and basically, ironically, you start at the top of this graph with 2007-8 showing as kind of an orange-colored line, and pretty much they are in a successive order as you move down the graph. The very last year, not the current year, but the very last year is one of those lines at the very bottom. What I would point out to you, though, is that bright green right in the very middle. That is this current year. I cannot remember the last time that I could be standing here telling you that we had enrollment in the month of April that was greater than the enrollment in the month of October. Typically, we have gotten into October, and then as you can see the trend right here, that they successively had declined throughout the course of the remaining months going through to the end of the year. So we really do feel like we have turned the corner, as I said. The issue is, though, not only is Brevard growing, but the state is growing. So for the current year, here's the reality. Some bad news, if you will, coupled with the growth. This is statewide numbers. When the legislature adopted their budget a year ago at this particular time, they were forecasting, as you can see on the first line here, a growth of about 14,000. They set aside almost $19 billion, and it was about $6,900 per student. Well, we got into the school year, and as the board is familiar with, and anybody who's been listening to us typically remembers, we do count our student population for the state twice. We do a count in October, we do another count in February. The problem is that it takes a few months for the state to go through and analyze all that, do the edits, rerun the calculation, and so from the October count, we never get notified until December, the so-called third count, and following February, we never get nosed on that until in April. Interestingly enough, Karen and I kind of joke about it this year. The December third calculation came on my birthday, December the 18th, right before the winter break, and the fourth calculation, April, came on her birthday on April the 17th. The problem is you're halfway through the year before you get the third, and then you're almost completely done. You only have about 2 months left when you get the fourth. So if there's any kind of repercussions, you're going to hope that if you grow in student population that the state will have enough money to pay you for those students because you've already hired teachers and paid for extra supplies, materials, textbooks, equipment, etc. The issue is, though, this year the state didn't have enough money. As you can see from the first column, they had started projecting growth at about 14,000 statewide. It ended up at well over 35,000 statewide. So what happened was a proration statewide of about $105 million. Bavard's was $2.8 million of that. Whereas we should have gotten paid an additional about $5 million. Instead, we got $2.8 million less than that. We only got paid $2.2 million for all of the growth of about 800 above where we had anticipated that we would be. For next year, a little bit of reality, if you will, in terms of a forecast. As we know, we're kind of in a quandary right now related to the budget, but there's a couple of things that I wanted to point out to you here just as a point of reference, because we don't know anything for certain. The State Board did their budget last September. School had barely started. They really didn't even have any good enrollment numbers to base theirs off of. But when you look at the governor, the House, and the Senate, they all generated their budgets based off of that third calculation, or the October count, those December numbers I just spoke about. And you can see that progressively the numbers have been increasing each time as everybody gets a little bit more information. Governor had to draw the line in the sand back in January to be able to do his. The House and Senate were able to have a little bit more time, a few more weeks before they submitted their budget documents. But I would reference you to the bottom line. Again, that first column progressively shows you that the number of FTE forecasted statewide in terms of growth is increasing. The House and Senate had agreed that it was only going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 25,000. But now the February count has been certified. Everybody knows that it was higher than what was anticipated. So now they have upped the projections for next year to 40,000, almost. The interesting thing is, look in the second column. They won't be able to up the dollar amount. What they will do is simply take the same dollars, that 19.6 billion, if you will, and they will simply just subdivide it by a larger number of FTE. And you can see I've indicated that for you in the last column. Now, naturally, that bottom line is all subject to question. We are told that absolutely everything's been signed off, so they will be using that growth of almost 40,000 students. We're just not for sure yet what they're going to do for the total dollars and how that will work out. In this particular example on that last line, I just used the House number only because it was about 19 million higher than the Senate number. We, of course, don't know what the final analysis will be. In terms of trying to give you some kind of a really broad concept, again, this is strictly draft. I can't say that enough. I was going to put a watermark across it, except that it wouldn't really take it. You wouldn't really be able to visualize it as well here. What we did was we took the House run, again, the one that was a little higher than the Senate, and we have gone through and tried to do kind of a what if for you, just to give you some kind of a concept that if that had been accepted before they adjourned, this is the way it would have laid out. We have an anomaly this coming year in that we're opening 2 new charter schools. Anytime we open new charter schools, it always creates a situation where they have as much growth, potentially, as we do. And in this particular case, for the coming year, right now, they're forecasted to have about 51% of the growth in student population, and we have about 49%. So that's why those numbers on the top line are so close together. Of course, categoricals, as we all know, that's the numbers that means whatever they give you, you have to spend in a certain area. As I shared with the superintendent, the only reason that line has any kind of a sizable amount in it is because they were looking at doubling the amount for digital classrooms. And so about 800,000 that would belong to digital classrooms. And then, of course, the new dollars. that are left over. So at this particular point in time, what you're really looking at is just subject to complete question. We have no idea whether this will work out anywhere close to this whatsoever. It's just that on the House run, it said, Brevard, you're going to get $21.4 million, and this is how we would have seen it laying out if those numbers had come to fruition. Superintendent wants to add something.
Yeah, I told Judy I'd be interjecting here because we had some conversation about this morning, whether to even present this slide. But I'd mention a couple things. This is not new to most of you. When you look at the bottom right, 21.4, but then you get back to the new dollars, what would be really discretionary in this example is 9.6. The 4.7 for student growth is going to go to pay for the teachers formulaically for the most part. But more important than that, we would have had a lot more confidence in this being somewhat ballparkish. That's not very good, is it, Ms. Henderson? 2 weeks ago, or maybe even a week, quite frankly. But we are starting to hear, and even the governor went on, I believe, national television and basically said, you know, he's given up on his tax cut and also his desire for education spending, and you know, Mr. Ziegler and I were with the Central Florida School Board Coalition yesterday, and all the lobbyists, now we're starting to hear that a lot of this has come back much closer to where we are now. Nobody contemplates any drop, so that's a good thing. But kind of hang on, and they come to session very early next year. It is an election year. That's when they like to put more. So the worry is that, and that some of the trade-off in the medical issue that they have between the two houses, that we're just hearing some things now that we weren't hearing all along the way. There was the feeling that the medical issue really might not have great implications in the end because the houses weren't terribly far apart in education. I'm just a little worried because that rhetoric is starting to change. So we still present this because this is the last thing the House put out there, but I'm a little worried. You know, for quite a while we thought somewhere around 3 and 4% is what we could hopefully count on. And I'm just not as confident about that given the rhetoric of the last few days. Is that fair, Judy?
That is very fair. Absolutely. And I shared with him that I had also heard the same thing on Friday when we had a closing call with Mixon's staff. And so absolutely what he said, those lobbyists yesterday echoed that. And I've been told 3 times from 3 different sources since the latter part of last week that we should consider at this point not getting any more on a per student basis than what we got for the current year. Now, we're growing, okay, so that will mean growth there. Just in summary, quickly, session, as you know, is scheduled for June 1 through 30th, and they did intend for that to be on Saturday for the closing day as a worst-case scenario. I'm hearing, though, that it may be, and the superintendent heard the same thing, they may get in and get it done and get out. But remember, it has to lie for 72 hours, the budget does, before they can vote on it. So my guess is we probably wouldn't see it any earlier than probably that second week, something like maybe on June the 8th or 9th as an example, and then they could still get out of town before the weekend. I would emphasize to you there's at least 4 things that I'll be watching for. It's not just the FEFP run. We do have to pay attention to the appropriations bill. We're looking for a conforming bill and an implementing bill. Some of the things that died that have budget implications could still resurface in any one of those last 3. Appropriations, conforming, or implementing. So we got to keep our eye on it. And just to reiterate, you have an agenda item tonight to change the date from Thursday the 25th for our budget workshop to Tuesday the 23rd, as accommodate the board's schedules, not to pull you out 2 different days on the same week for workshops. But at this particular point in time, if they push the timeline all the way up until about June the 20th, keep in mind, it's just 3 days later, we'll be having a budget workshop. So for now, what I've asked Karen to do is go ahead and present the budget and base it on the House at this point. So, okay. Questions?
Questions? John?
I just want to clarify, so if they come back prior to June 20th and everything is resolved, we're still going to base our budget workshop on the information that the House has already put out?
We're going to try our best to update it to whatever revenue we get. The problem is if we don't find out the specifics until Friday or Saturday, I'm not sure we can turn around all of the budget documents in time, because we wanted to be able to give you something before that and to be able to look at. So it may be, as I've said to Karen on a number of occasions, it may just be that we don't have the right number to balance to because we don't know the actual revenue. We're going to try our best. If they get done the week before, then that's a whole different ballgame. But we wanted to be able to try to get a book to you or the books to you by about a week ahead of time. And so we may be presenting a book to you beforehand. We can always swap out pages if we need to.
Could we not push our workshop to accommodate whatever deadline they come out of with Tallahassee? To me, it seems like it would make a whole lot more sense to be working with real numbers when we know what's going on, unless there's some reason that we have to have that budget workshop on that date.
There's nothing sacred about having to have it on the 23rd. It was just, again, to accommodate so that we wouldn't be pulling you guys out for 2 days during the same week. The issue is your appropriation side, the budget in terms of what you're going to spend on supplies or textbooks or equipment or budgeting for the existing positions and the positions that are growing and built into the PAR, those will all be exactly the same. The one thing we won't have for you is a firm revenue number to know how much really there will be to balance to. The other appropriation side, the expenditure side, will already all be done, except not knowing what to balance to. So we can accommodate whatever the board wishes.
It seems kind of, yeah, I'm with Mrs. Belford. I'm like, well, why go over numbers that aren't relevant?
It is possible that, we can move it to another week. You certainly have a board meeting coming up in July that's fairly soon. I don't know that you want to do both things on the same day, but, whatever the wishes are. It is a dry spell until we get to the first hearing. I mean, it's all the way at the end of July, so we want to make sure we have an opportunity to share something with you.
Based on.
Well, we could have
budget, so I'm just going to say that we change it. I may or may not be here.
But we are, if we had it the same, our summer meetings are usually short. Couldn't we have it the same day as the July meeting?
Yeah, that's fine. If you're going to do it some other time, if you were going to try to do it a week later,
No.
I'm not going to be available.
I'm not here that following.
No, I was suggesting the same day as we have a meeting, because usually our summer meetings are fairly, because we start them in the morning. Could we do it following our July meeting?
Absolutely. We could do that.
That makes more sense, because hopefully we'll have selected a superintendent by then that will
Yeah.
be part of that.
I guess,
Actually, if I could interject, if we did that, we would actually, no, we wouldn't know the final millage, but at least we would have an estimate. We would know our final tax roll, but the state would not have certified our final millage by that point. But everything would be much more up to date, as
Let's
much
do
as it could
that.
be. Okay.
Question, Karen, is that a problem with that? John?
No, I don't have a problem with that, but I do have a question.
Okay. Yeah.
So, as you well know, you know me well enough, I appreciate the research, and, we don't know what we don't know.
Right.
But revenue is never certified, never certain in anything.
Right.
Right? So, what are we doing proactively to look at best, worst case scenario, multiple scenarios of where we could be based on these projections, but also, you know, I mean, are we looking at worst case scenarios, best case scenarios? Are we presenting the superintendent with specifics about where we could be? You know, if everything goes perfect, we've got this, or we are down here, and here's where we're going to have some issues. Here's the things that are going to keep a new superintendent up at night. Here's the things that are going to keep the board up at night. So I don't want to just sit back and wait and see what Tallahassee delivers. We have a pretty good idea of a window of where it's going to be. It's not going to fluctuate more than, you know, a few $100s here or there. So I want to make sure that we are being proactive in bringing those solutions, especially since we have a new superintendent coming in, and we present him with those, or her, with those exact recommendations or ideas. I haven't heard that tonight, and maybe you've already done, maybe your team's already doing that, and they do that on a consistent basis, but I haven't heard that. It's more of, we're just going to sit back and wait.
No, that is an excellent point, and you have made that consistently. That was one reason for I wanted to put this slide up there, because I wanted the board to really realize, as well as our community, our employees, that we do have a heavy impact this particular year for charter schools. That's something that is an anomaly, again, whenever you're opening. The other thing is, though, back to this slide, I don't think anybody could have foreseen that we were going to have a $105 million proration. The problem is here, they don't calculate Brevard in isolation. You're subject to all the 66 other districts plus those special locations. They rerun the entire formula. When there is not enough money to pay for all of the growth, they stick everybody with a proration. And that means even for districts who didn't make their projections, they got a negative proration. They got subtracted. So none of us could have foreseen this. We try talking, finance officers, among each other to try to get an up-to-date, are you growing more, did you meet your projections kind of thing. But until the state, that's the problem with having current year funding, for the state to run these formulas as late as they do. I'm sitting here in December, and December at winter break, basically, we found out the proration was $51 million. Then it was April, the end of April, when I found out the proration was $105 million. You know, that our number had grown as much as it had. So that makes it very difficult for us to kind of plan ahead. Now, because this happened, then I do believe that the state opened their doors and they said, we're going to allow people to come back and revise their projections, because normally we have to submit our student projections by winter break of the year before. So last December, we had to submit our projections for this coming year. After the state saw what was happening and how far off the projections had been for this particular year, they went back and they contacted school districts and they said, we've seen that you've actually grown between the October count and the February count. You may want to up your projections. Well, we'd already upped ours once, but we upped it again when they made that call. So we're trying to be proactive about that, and that's why I said here I felt comfortable that at least they're projecting 40,000. Now, who's to say it might be 50 or 55,000? It's been a long time since the state has grown that kind of an amount, but the way the funding system is built, about the only thing you can do is just carve out money and set it to the side.
I think that, Judy, one of the answers to your question, Ms. Craig, through senior staff on a regular basis, I mean, we are bringing membership, you know, upgrades. We've had a lot of conversation, and Judy kind of alerted us early on with 2 new charters opening. That makes a different world, and you got to understand how that plays, because when charters close, there's a net gain. When charters open, there's a net loss, because it isn't perfect, you know, student per student. But even like as recently as to this today, while Judy, Ms. Preston and Dr. Pace were in a meeting all day, when they came on a break, I asked them to come by, and we kind of shared with Dr. Pace, okay, now given some of this new rhetoric that's happening, let's go back and take a look at some of the positions that we have in play. So that conversation occurs, on a regular basis in senior staff, but then even again, as early as today, try to say, we've got to prepare for a few eventualities, because this thing is starting to look a little different. And so we began to have some of that conversation, and we'll have more of that. But I wanted to let you know that those kind of things are pretty regular occurrence in our senior staff meetings, as to, particularly with membership, numbers changing, different things that affect the budget, considerations pro and con. So there's I think is that addressing some of your questions.
It does, thanks.
I think, too, keeping our eye on legislation and the fact that not everything died, I'm afraid. So that's why I said we got to watch the appropriations bill and the conforming and the implementing bills.
Judy, when's the call?
Actually, they've not released it yet.
Okay. Well,
And
the
that's a
call
good
is,
point.
the governor will direct, and everybody believes it's going to be pretty tight around the budget. If that's the case, most of the stuff that's been up there is dead, because it has to tie directly to the budget. Now, they will, as Judy said, they are going to get very creative at trying to tie a few things, especially if you're a legislator and you want it. But if the call is tight, it's going to be about the budget, and most of the rest of the stuff, FHSA, all these other things, and we think the call is going to be tight because they keep saying, we'll be right back in September real quickly, and we'll be addressing some of these things. So we expect a pretty tight call, just the budget, and suspect there's been some conversation behind scenes already.
Right, and the only other thing I've heard of would be health insurance, health care, because of the Medicaid issue.
Okay. Any other questions? Always good news as always, Judy.
She always dresses in black.
Gonna say you're gonna start bringing your umbrella again, right?
That was a black cloud.
Oh, the black cloud, okay. Okay, we're now at the public comment portion of the agenda. The maximum allowed time for each speaker is 3 minutes. Clarification of information presented and answers to questions specific to district business and educational matters will be posted on the school board's website under the section called For the Record. Please be reminded that profane, abusive, or slanderous speech is not permitted. I request that you speak into the microphone and state your name for the record. We have 18 speakers signed up tonight. I'll call up in groups of 3. First speaker is Lisa Stephen, followed by Marcus Hockman, followed by Jada Kuig.
Hello, I'm Lisa Steffen, and I represent my daughter from District 4. I would like to express my concern about the current Algebra Honors EOC. I'd also like to tell the board that I've never said or wrote about any kind of such concern, such as FSA testing or FCAT. I've never approached it in any way. I've never had a problem with testing. My daughter is a current honors student in 8th grade at Kennedy Middle School. She's an excellent straight-A student who has maintained an almost perfect 4.0 or higher GPA her entire 2 years at Kennedy Middle School. I encourage any of you to ask at random any of her current teachers, past or present, in any subject to vouch for the type of student she is. I can give you her name after the meeting. She has also been recruited and accepted by Rockledge High's Cambridge program to start next year because she denied being in Cambridge this year by choice. I'm not a parent who is jumping on some media bandwagon to sound like every other ranting griper with no verified facts. I am a parent who finds it completely unacceptable that my child has had her confidence shaken to the point of a complete sobbing meltdown after the first portion of the Algebra Honors EOC this year. Although she was able to stay composed after the second portion, which was yesterday, she is still dejected and insecure. My child is in no way dramatic or any kind of an attention seeker or drama queen. In fact, she is quite the opposite. She is a bookworm and very shy. I have talked to her and other students from Kennedy Middle School, as well as multiple other parents from area middle schools such as McNair and Edgewater, about this particular EOC. Across the board from multiple and very diverse sources, these kids are all saying one thing. They have all said that over half of the EOC was material they have never even seen. It was so foreign, they said, and I quote, "I don't even know how to solve the problems. I didn't know enough about the problem to make an educated guess or where to begin. I have never seen any problems like them before." These statements come from well-established academically qualified students. Some students were even Duke University Award recipients. Something needs to be heard here. I am not the only one thinking this as a parent, and these kids all cannot be wrong. I personally do not care if my child passes this EOC because I will still feel it was a poor reflection across the board as to her knowledge of algebra at a high school level. My child's teacher has taught for over 20 years. I know some of his past students. Both they and their parents speak high praise and high remarks of him. His pass ratio for past EOCs is almost at 100%. He is a professional who has gave not only this year his students the option to attend an additional EOC review on a Saturday, but in many other years past as well. I find it hard to believe that this man could have such stature and tenure if he was anything other than exceptional in preparing his students.
I'm sorry, but your time's up.
Good evening, board members and Dr. Bingley. I clearly want to state this. As school board members and BPS leaders, you work for me. Not necessarily Marcus Hochman, the individual, but more that you work for me as the parent and as a teacher. As you will hear and see tonight, and in the future, parents, teachers, and students are angry and frustrated about the FSA testing and the EOCs. Personally, as a teacher, I wasted about 30 hours of testing instead of teaching my kids. As a teacher, I am also truly concerned that I cannot go back and review with my students on how they can improve on learning a skill or a set of skills, or as a teacher, how I can improve on my teaching craft. Because by the time we get the results and see what specific areas to work on, it is already next year. As a parent, I am not looking forward to the stress of my child being promoted or not being promoted because of one test, or placing that responsibility of pressure on my son. As a taxpayer, I cannot stand for the waste taxpayer dollars on the FSA itself and the logistical economical waste associated with this test. As a board, I expect that you as a collective body of representatives for the people will listen, represent, and work with BPS stakeholders, which are parents, students, and teachers. Please remember that as a board you work for us, and don't ever forget it. Because honestly, parents, teachers, we own this. This is my building. Oak Park is my school. We own this. This is ours. Thank you for listening and your time.
Jada Koog, followed by Stacy Donovan, followed by Darcy Addo.
Hi, I'm Jada Kulig, and I'm an 8th grader at McNair Magnet Middle School. I wanted to speak to you all about how high-stakes tests have impacted me personally. I have an auditory processing disorder and dyslexia. APD and dyslexia can cause difficulties in my ability to process spoken and written language accurately and can affect learning in all subject areas, or just a few at a time. This can vary throughout my life and often causes my performance to be inconsistent. Currently, it is in math that is being affected the most. Dyslexia and APD affects the way I process, store, and retrieve information, often resulting in problems with memory, processing speed, organization, and sequencing. It does not mean that I am any less intelligent than my peers, or that I'm lazy, lack motivation to learn, or that I am a slow learner. In fact, I am a rather quick learner. I am just also happen to be a quick forgetter. School has not always come easy for me, and I often have to work much harder than my friends to complete my assignments and study for my weekly tests. And even though these challenges have made it much more difficult for me to perform well in school, I am in advanced classes and have been an honor roll student for the past 3 years. Despite the fact that I am normally a goody-goody and try my best to avoid trouble and have been referred to as the teacher's pet more than once, I decided to minimally participate in the FSAs this year. This was a rather easy decision for me because I have to come to the realization that while standardized tests may have the ability to point out my weaknesses, they rarely have the ability to point out my strengths. They don't have the ability to measure my curiosity or measure my ability to formulate an original idea or measure my creativity or even my work ethic. They also do not measure the impact that many of my teachers have had on me as a student. In fact, it is often because of my teachers that I am able to be so successful in the classroom. Unfortunately, because of APD and dyslexia are lifelong problems, the study habits and alternate approaches that I have had to figure out and what leads to my success in the classroom can often be very difficult to demonstrate on standardized tests. It is because of this I am becoming increasingly concerned as I am about to enter high school that my success during the next 4 years will mostly hinge on whether or not I can pass standardized tests rather than my ability to continue, persevere, and overcome these challenges. Thank you.
Great job, Jada.
Stacy Donovan, Darcy Addo, Kinley Nagel.
Good evening. My name is Stacy Donovan. I'm the parent of 3 children attending schools in Brevard County. BPS mission statement says that you serve every student with excellence as its standard, and I'm here to address the less than excellent experience of specifically one of my children who for the last 7 years has had an IEP in the Brevard County schools. Like me, she's hard of hearing. It was never communicated to her or me that IEP students took these standardized assessment tests on different days. On days her peers were testing, she was shuffled around throughout the day, never knowing what was next. On days she was told that she was going to test, she wasn't. And on days she wasn't expected to be tested, she was pulled from a class where she was already engaged. She's had shorter lunch times, different lunch times, and schedules. This is hardly accommodating, very poorly planned and implemented. Routines and structure are important for all children, but can be especially beneficial for children with special needs. Routines help them to do better with their tasks and give them a sense of confidence in their ability to handle them. She cannot be expected to perform well, especially when the stakes are so high. In her mind, she's thinking about her shorter lunch. She's wondering what she missed in music and math and English. You're feeding into her natural struggle with control, attention. She may not be 100% available, but she is expected to be. Is it worth the risk? Is it helping her reach her greatest potential? And isn't that the goal? Her non-IEP students' peers were able to receive instruction that they missed while testing, and she was not given those same accommodations, yet expected to do the same homework assignment. You're creating an atmosphere that encourages anxiety instead of excellence, setting her up for failure instead of success. If you think about all the resources and time spent on this one IEP student, which we are so thankful for, you're introducing these unnecessary factors which become an obstruction. We cannot expect any child to perform well in this environment, especially those with special needs. I emailed the teacher immediately, the IEP teacher, and the principal. It's been 6 days, and I have not had a response. This is just one small part of my growing concern for their education. In August of 2014, I requested for her to receive cognitive testing during her IEP meeting. I felt the current one was not offering her substantial growth, and I was concerned that there were other issues that were preventing us from meeting her needs. 9 months later, I do not have the results. Results that could give answers to my concerns, provide services for my child that would encourage her independence and success, including the SAS on these assessments that we chose not to opt out of. This is absolutely unacceptable. Success needs to be achievable for all students, and in order to ensure students to have the opportunity for success, I'm asking that you take action by implementing clear communication concerning testing procedures for all IEP students so children and parents know what to expect. Timeframes that are clearly communicated concerning all cognitive test results that could change services and accommodations in the IEP to ensure the most effective education plan.
Ma'am.
Thank you so much for your time.
Dr. Setti? Yeah, I'm going to have Dr. Setti meet with you about your situation because what's happened is unacceptable. Yeah, I'm going to have Dr. Setti find out what school, but Dr. Setti will meet with you on that, and there should. Darciato, Kinley Nagel, Burton Bice. Thank you, Dr. Setti.
Good evening. My name is Darcy Addo. This year's legislative session taught us several things about education in Florida. Our elected officials do not know what's best for children. No amount of signatures on a petition can compete with the corruption in Tallahassee. The word accountability has been hijacked by people who understand neither the art nor the science of teaching children. The misuse of the word accountability will prevail until we figure out how to change the narrative and aggressively work to advocate for public education with one voice. The same people with a biased agenda managed to seize the task of creating a validation committee for our state assessment. But test validation is not meant to be political. In fact, it's set by educational precedent based on science and research. Validation is a rigorous process that occurs before the administration of a test. And here's why that matters to you. You are our voice. You are the ones that we have duly elected to speak on our behalf. And you, 5, have the obligation to do what's best for our schools here in Brevard County, because you took an oath of office to uphold the Constitution of the state of Florida that reads in part that education is a fundamental value to the people of the state of Florida. It is the duty of the state to make adequate provision for a uniform, efficient, and high-quality system of education, not of assessment, of education. So I wonder if legislative mandates impede you from upholding your constitutional obligation to provide an efficient, high-quality system of education, are you serving the best interest of Brevard stakeholders with excellence as the standard? Because I wonder, will you be accountable to the stakeholders of Brevard County who are here telling their stories, or will you choose to hold the state of Florida accountable? Because there are too many instances, and I've brought you lots of documentation and you're hearing them tonight, of the denial of free and appropriate public education. Too many students who are not having their IEP accommodations followed. Too many students who are losing recess in the name of test preparation. Too much lost instructional time. Too much instruction that does not align to, or too much assessment that does not align to instruction. Too much, essentially, loss of common sense and best practice in the name of test preparation. So I implore you then to drop the 30% of weighting of EOCs, just like Lee County did. Promote third graders based on report cards, just like Bay County did. Stop the excessive and maddening portfolio assessment that is still happening right here, right now in Brevard County, that is stripping our third grade teachers from the ability to teach their classes. Stop telling parents right here, stop our teachers from telling parents right here in Brevard County that they need to attend summer school if they didn't take the FSA. Let teachers teach and let our kids learn.
Kinley Nagel? Okay. Burton Bice, followed by Gary Schifrin.
Good evening. I'm here to speak to you today about your non-discrimination policy. My name is Burton Bice, and I'm the Secretary-Treasurer of the local chapter of PFLAG, which stands for Parents and Friends of Lesbian, Gay, and Transgender Persons. I'm a proud parent of a gay son who was a very successful executive in the high fashion retail industry. The school board's non-discrimination policy is incomplete because it does not include sexual orientation and gender identity. They should be added soonest because it's the right thing to do. One of the school board's most important responsibilities is protection of the children entrusted to your care. Many studies have shown that LGBT individuals are at a much higher risk of harassment, bullying, depression, and even suicide. Now, Brevard will not be setting a precedent by adding sexual orientation and gender identity. For example, Orange County includes sexual orientation and gender identity in their non-discrimination policy. You have a legal responsibility to protect your employees and the children entrusted to your care. But more importantly, you have a moral responsibility. To protect our children, please add sexual orientation and gender identity to your non-discrimination policy. It is the right thing to do. Thank you for your consideration.
Yeah, we talked about it. Okay, Gary Schifrin, Richard Charbonneau, Tamia Bacco.
Gary Schifrin. Dr. Bingley, school board members, I've come before you this evening to address an issue that was discussed at a recent board meeting. Back in October, the chair brought up a concern related to holding closed athletic practices. With the desire to be transparent, the discussion was whether to decree that all athletic contests be open or, under certain conditions, allow some practices to be closed. It was decided to put together a committee made up of interested partners, including parents, administrators, athletic directors, to discuss the consideration of the matter. This committee met, and their ultimate recommendation was to allow the school, with the approval of the principal, to make a sound educational decision related to the warranting of closing a practice, understanding that the board would prefer practices to remain open. Now, that sounded like a workable recommendation. Then we have the discussion that took place a few board meetings ago when the chair and the board discussed the recommendation of the committee. And to make a long story short, the chair basically dismissed the recommendation of the committee and stated that it was the direction of the board that all practices be open. I asked Dr. Theddy if my interpretation was correct, and she indicated that a memo was going out to principals indicating all athletic contests must be open. So here's my concern. I hope the board appreciates and understands how hard our administrators work and how challenging their jobs are. Remember, these are the people who are at the schools from before light and way after sundown. They have been entrusted to make decisions that are in the best interest of our students, staff, parents, and community. With that, I'm puzzled and confused why this board did not take the recommendation of the committee and allow our principals to look at each situation and make a decision that would be in the best for their school. The recommendation of the committee allowed this to occur. I, for one, took the action that was taken and the message being sent to our principals that they did not have faith in their decision-making. I hope this is not the case, but the action you took certainly reflected this lack of trust, and many principals I talked to felt the same. So what I would like to request is that in the future, please keep in mind that this board approves all principal appointments, and it would be nice for them to know that they have faith, that you have faith in their decision-making. Thank you very much.
Richard Charbonneau, Tamia Bacco.
Good evening, Richard Charbonneau, Satellite Beach. I got a little confused before here when I came up here because I was operating under the the rules of the commission because I spent a lot of time over there. So now I know the rules here, so it's a little bit different, but I'll try and abide by them. It's unique. I get to make polite accusations, ask questions, get no answers, and absent a response from the board, one could derive that the accusations are correct and true accusations. What caught my interest on tonight's business was this reverter clause alone. On the reverter clause, Commissioner Ziegler receives thousands of dollars from Zimmerman Construction. Nobody else does. And was this even disclosed to the rest of the board before? And does he intend to vote when he clearly has a convoluted interest in the outcome of this vote? By the rules of ethics, he should have disclosed this long before and disclosed it to the public. And he should recuse himself from any voting, and as well as any discussion that could sway the other board members to vote Zimmerman or not. Scott Ellis and Trudy Infantini are of the opinion that this should be actually bid out. But in my opinion, it has the appearance of another Brevard good old boy setup. No response. Great.
Okay, Tamya Becko. Is it Tamya?
Yes.
Okay, Becko?
Yes.
Okay.
You said it right. Good evening. Tonight, I would like to speak to the board about the EOCs. I would like the board to take a position behind our children and their future. Our oldest daughter will be in 7th grade in the fall. She has always excelled in school and has been recommended for Algebra 1. My husband and I are considering not allowing her to take this advanced course. I wonder if our governor and legislators were hoping that this would be the result, to deny children who could do the advanced classes not the opportunity to take them because of the unfair tests and grading policies. When an EOC is given that is not created by the classroom teacher and counts for 30% of their grade and has issues that has been reported across the state, like computer glitches, being able to use a calculator or not using a calculator, I wonder if my daughter should take a class like this. This is our daughter's GPA being affected, her chances of graduating, earning scholarships, her future. We don't take this lightly. The new bill signed by the governor gives local school boards like yourself the power to make a change. Our state education leaders can no longer be trusted to keep our students' best interest in mind. More and more, we will be relying on locally elected school boards, such as yourself, to protect our kids and their future. Do what is right and make these exams worth nothing. Don't ruin someone's future.
Linda Peterson, Shannon Parks, Spence Guerin.
Good evening. My name is Linda Peterson. I have a son in the 10th grade. I know you've heard many stories from us parents about the frustrations with the FSAs and EOCs. I was going to say a lot of the things that have already been said. I'm going to skip all that. I just want to tell you our experience, what happened last week. My son has autism, high functioning, anxiety, OCD, as well as some other things. He has an extensive IEP. He was supposed to take his EOC for geometry last Tuesday. He prepared, he studied, mentally he got ready, went for the test, sat down, waited. Proctor came over and said, sorry, you have accommodations, you won't be testing today. There's my son's anxiety level through the roof. They had to have him call me, he's crying, da-da-da-da-da. Yes, 16 years old, he's crying because you don't understand what it's like for these kids. It's hard. He's not a good test taker. So this was the email I sent to the school. Matthew contacted me upset this morning. He was supposed to take his geometry EOC, but by the time it was to take the test, further, he wasn't able to take it. This has an even higher stake because he knows this test is 30% of his grade. He's not a good test taker. You know that. We've discussed this at every IEP meeting. Why was his accommodations not ready? What is this going to do to him? So now you're telling me he's going to take it next week, or, well, maybe Thursday and Monday. No, we're not going to take it Thursday and Monday, 3 days apart with a weekend in between. He's not going to be able to do this. Not to mention, he's now going to lose an additional 2 days of classroom time to learn. What is the point? It just doesn't make any sense. My son said it pretty well. He said, Mom, I don't understand. Why are we taking an EOC when we haven't even finished school? Let me tell you what my answer was. For the first time as a parent, I kind of didn't have an answer, at least not a good one. All I could say was, I don't know, and you're absolutely right. It is dumb. It doesn't make any sense. So the other thing is the moral of this story is, if you go, let us go back to teacher-created EOCs. Guess what? This wouldn't have happened. That's right. It wouldn't have happened. The teacher would have known he needed those EOCs. It would have been done. It would have been ready. His grade would have been up. Do you think my son did well today now on the EOC all by himself in the classroom? Guess what? We'll never know if he would have did better last week or today. But I guarantee you this, he did not do well today. And I hold Brevard County responsible.
Okay, Shannon Parks, Spence Guerin, Debbie Sandstorm.
Hello, my name's Shannon Parks. I have 2 children that are students of Brevard Public Schools. I'm a product of Brevard Public Schools, and I've taught for the past 20 years as a teacher in Brevard Public Schools. My high-achieving daughter has always been excited about getting report cards, getting FCAT scores. She's never gotten anything lower than an A, never gotten anything but 5s on FCAT. She's preparing for the geometry FSA. She went to the Saturday classes. She's an 8th grader taking her 2nd high school course. She sends me a text message afterwards. Mom, I failed this test. I was not taught half of what was on the test I took today. My daughter's track record, I believe her. I believe she did not see half of what was on the test. Her geometry teacher had planned to retire last year. When she had all of her class score the highest level on the geometry EOC, she decided to go 1 more year to give her algebra students her expertise. This is not a teacher problem. This is not a student problem. Maybe teacher-made tests are not the solution. We have county-made tests. Teachers know what is expected. They know what the students need to learn. If my daughter does not score well on this test, I want to see, how can I see if her curriculum was aligned with what was on the test? I've never felt before that I needed to protect my child from what's happening to her in her classroom and at school. Thank you.
Spence? Spence?
My name is Spence Guerin, and I hate to, I mean, there's some serious problems here. I have a whole new kind of subject regarding Old Melbourne High School and the reverter clause. What is your responsibility regarding public school property? I've been thinking about that a little bit, as have some of you. Your responsibility is to protect the public interest in this property. The public passed a school bond back in the 1920s for $100,000. The old Melbourne High School building was built in 1926, at a cost of $200,000. That's in 1926 dollars. That's a lot of money. In other words, the public has invested early in this property and continues to have an interest in it. The contract with BRAG, Brevard Regional Arts Group, was meant to safeguard the public interest. This is a historically significant public building. It qualifies for listing on the National Register of Historic Places. It is one of the 11 most endangered historic sites in Florida this year. I think you are about to sell the public interest in this property without requiring a public hearing, without requiring any study of alternatives, without even requiring an appraisal, without even a bidding process. No other organization is being given an opportunity to take over this building for the greater public interest. Only a single buyer, a Mr. Zimmerman, is allowed to buy, all arranged essentially behind closed doors. Your duty is to the tax-paying public, not to development interests. Consider your role carefully. Are you disposing of public school property in the most exemplary manner? A lot of people out here think not. Across Florida, what happens to the most endangered historic site will be recorded and not forgotten. Some people are saying all you're now trying to do about this is CYA. Do you know what that means? It's not too late to say, wait a minute, this is public school property and we have a heavy responsibility in this. Let's do a public hearing. Let's insist on a study of alternatives. You might learn that there are excellent alternatives and public benefit in some ideas are being urgently suggested. Given time for a real bona fide feasibility study, a Friends of Old Mill High could be put together to come together and rescue the building for reuse and the greater public good. Now that would be exemplary. And you would be remembered for doing the right thing.
I'm sorry, sir, your time is up.
Learn more at oldmillhigh.com. Thank you.
Debbie Sandstorm, Richard Smith, Dan Bennett.
Hello. I am here speaking to you tonight not as a BFT member, not as an astronaut high school teacher. I am here tonight as my most important job, grandmother. As a grandmother, I have to go against every public school ounce in my body to recommend strongly to my son and daughter-in-law that my grandson and granddaughter not go to Madison Middle School. The school is unsafe. It is now a D school, and it is losing about 30% of its best teachers. All of this traces back to the administration of the school. Every year, we hear at Astronaut how this is the worst 9th grade class ever. These kids are why Madison is a D. Funny thing is, within a few weeks of being at Astronaut, we have the discipline problems under control. And Astronaut takes these same D students, and we manage to be an A school. You can't blame the students. They just need structure, guidelines, and discipline, along with respect. Unfortunately, the teachers at Madison are handcuffed when they try to give it to the students, these same things, by the lack of support from the administration at Madison. You now have the students running the school, teachers leaving, good teachers at an alarming rate, and parents looking for any place to send their students. Ask Park Avenue, St. Teresa's, Sculptor, Jackson, Edgewood, homeschooling, FLVS. I am positive their numbers are up while Madison's are shrinking. The other problem with Madison being a D school and parents scurrying for alternative placements, it is affecting property values in all of Mims and North Titusville, and not in a positive way. This to me is secondary to students' education, but it is a big deal to many homeowners in North Brevard. I don't believe you are unaware to any of this, but the problem is out of control, and something needs to be done for me and my grandchildren. The sooner the better. Madison has always been a positive feeder school in our chain. It is hard to believe now it is such a weak link.
Whenever you're ready, Richard.
Okay, Board. Richard Smith, President of Brevard Federation of Teachers. I'm speaking for a teacher tonight who's home with her children, because that's where parents need to be. And you've seen in past board meetings how teachers have shown up, and we don't ask them to do that often because we know they need to be home. They've got papers to grade, they've got kids to feed, they've got homework with their own kids to do. And so I stand in the place of a teacher right now when I read what she wrote. I've been teaching English for 9 years. Every year I've had to proctor multiple standardized assessments. After my first experience proctoring the Florida Standards Assessment for math, the only thing I can think to say is, I'm sorry. The 8th graders who sat in a 3.5-hour testing block with me today and a 2-hour testing block yesterday for one test, I'm sorry. To my current and former students who are being churned in and out of computer labs day after day to sit and test for hours instead of receiving direct instruction or being able to collaborate and take ownership of learning, I'm sorry. To my students who had to go to the gym instead of English class today because their English teacher was proctoring a math test, I'm sorry. I'm truly sorry that our Department of Education and our legislators, and may I mention Steve Crisafulli in particular, the Speaker of the House, who bailed on his constitutional responsibility to have a budget. They have chosen, and by the way, that was my editorial comment, my pardon. And our legislature has chosen an age-inappropriate test and testing length for you. I wish I could change it. I wish they would listen to teachers when they say that we know how to best assess our students. I wish they would see you like I do, a name, not a number. I am sorry. And this is written by Vanessa Skipper, Merritt Island resident. All I can say is, we all know the problem. You know the problem. I'm not telling you something you don't know. These parents, by the way, are here tonight when they could be home with their children because they are very concerned. And I would say, I think it's safe to say that for every parent that's spoken, there's 1,000 that are home thinking the same thoughts. All I can say is this: we have a tough job to work on. I believe that this board is capable and is pointed in the right direction. I want to thank you for all the leadership in particular that you guys have shown in this area. And I will simply say this: anything I can do, anything that we can do as Brevard Federation of Teachers to help this work so that we can get this end of course test to where it's supposed to be, which would be end of the course, let us know.
Okay, Dan Bennett, Karen Clark, and then Sarah Hansen.
Good evening, Dr. Bingley. Good evening, members of the board. Wow, you're getting earful tonight on testing, and I want to commend you all for taking on that topic. You did. You took it. Every one of you took it on with your professional organizations, and we're making some progress. You have the ability to follow through, continue on with the legislators, continue on with direction to this district to end those courses, or end the courses, end the test, and the testing wherever you can. I want to talk about something else tonight. It's kind of a difficult topic. But first, let me report that we had a good day of bargaining today. It's not my place to give you the bargaining update. I'm sure you'll get that from your chief negotiator. But on your behalf, we're having some very good discussion back and forth. It's difficult discussion because we come to the table with these issues. We're far apart than after a day of discussion. I don't think there's any question on either side that we understand where the sides are, we understand what our values are, we understand what we want, and then we start moving closer together. So it's slow going, but we're getting there. But the foundation of all of this, the foundation of the trust, comes from past language, comes from what's already in the contract, and your willingness to support that language without that much of a fight. Now, here and there, we have discussions of, wait, is that what that meant? And we have to go back to the bargaining notes, and we have to go back to past implementation and past practice and make sure we're on the same page. And we're at a sticky point at some schools right now, and I want to report that to you. Not that it's your job to hear a grievance, but I want you to know what's going on, what could be coming down the line through the grievance process. In fact, it's about to start. It's not my place to report it to you, but it's about to start. And that has to do with our language at every effort shall be made not to move teacher assignments. Now, members go crazy sometimes when they hear that every effort, and they say, why didn't you just say language that says nobody's assignment's going to move at all? Well, we put the every effort in there because sometimes you have a case where, let's say a school had 5 kindergarten sections, and next year they're only going to have 4 because of how many students are coming into the school. Well, I can't grieve you if you only have 4 sections of kindergarten because that's all the kids you have. Sometimes changes have to happen. Sometimes teachers and principals make a mutual agreement. They say, you know, I've always been wanting to teach this, so can I go do that? And so you do that. So, but otherwise, every effort is made to keep things the way they are. And we have cases where not only are principals making moves, shuffling things all around, but then they're even trying to say, well, that's not what that language means. Well, I want to remind you that at the table last year, you actually brought that language. That piece of language you got ratified is actually stronger than what BFT brought you. Because in past years of negotiations where we got little bits of that language here and there, you know, it took a couple years to get the strong language we got, we came in and said, well, we understand, this is our proposal from last year, we said, we understand there might be issues of VAM scores, there might be issues of evaluations, there might be reasons principals want to move them around, and you all countered with, no, let's just every effort don't move people. And so now we expect that language to be upheld. So some grievances might be happening, and we're going to do this, and we're going to be asking, we're going to need your support, because it's in our contract, and we expect everything in our contract to have credibility so we can move forward in negotiations. All right, thanks for listening.
Karen Clark?
My name is Karen Clark, and I have an 8th grader attending Central Middle School. There are an overwhelming amount of issues with this year's testing process. I am unhappy about the amount of testing, class time being severely impacted, knowing these tests have not been validated, the tests will not be back until possibly December, an unfair advantage different students have due to taking the test over a month's time. I am giving you the calendar from Central Middle School from March to May, which shows you the out-of-control testing schedule. They are testing for over 6 full weeks. I will focus my comments tonight to specifically address the end-of-course geometry exam. My daughter took the exam on April 27th and 28th, an entire month before school ends. Other middle school students took the exam the following Wednesday and Thursday, 9 days later. These students had 9 additional days to prepare for the test. Students in another district were given calculators to use on the first day of the test in error. So these tests are now invalidated, and these students will have at least a month additional time to prepare for the test. There have been questions on the test that were not in the textbook or in the curriculum. These tests are counted as 30% of her yearly grade, and geometry will be on her high school transcript. Her GPA will be part of how she will qualify for Bright Futures. Because these tests have a large impact on her yearly grade, this could negatively affect her ability to qualify for Bright Futures. This issue does not just affect my daughter. These problems affect thousands of Brevard County students. The way these tests have been administered are fundamentally unfair and give unfair advantage to some students. The legislature recently passed a bill giving power back to the local school boards. I admire Lee County School Board, who has chosen not to count these flawed tests as 30% of their students' grades. You recently shared with Florida Today newspaper test that you were easing back on the test, but what you actually did was give each principal the power to decide whether to use district end-of-course or teacher end-of-course tests for the final exam week. You did not talk at all about the weight of the 30% of the end-of-course exam. This causes unequal treatment to the students of Brevard Public Schools, with the principals making decisions of which test to use. This is what I want to happen. I want our school board to use the power the legislature gave you to positively affect change and use this for the good of all students. I am tired of the ping-ponging back and forth from you to the legislature of who is responsible for this testing abomination. I want you to tear up the legislature made me do it button and protect all our students from this substandard testing process. Do not count these grades as 30% of their yearly grade. Thank you.
And our final speaker, Sarah Hansen. Hansen.
Hello. I'm in District 3. I'm going to try to not speak about things that have already been mentioned before, except for I do want to point out and have on the record that the fact that our Brevard children who need help the most have been getting it the least, and I'd like the record to state that that's morally reprehensible. We also have, because of the standardized tests, loss of gifted services and programs. We have closed media centers, which also means a lack of resources for our kids during all of the weeks that they spend prepping and testing and everything. Also, another troubling issue would be the no recess for elementary school kids, which I'm not really sure who made that decision, if that was principals or perhaps particular teachers, because, you know, the tests mean if you get to keep your job, so there's a little bit of pressure there. So I'm also not sure if that's better or worse than the kids who are forced to eat their lunch in the classroom rather than with their friends because they are doing, of course, test prepping. We also have an excessive amount of homework. You've got wasted class time because you have to spend a bunch of time prepping and taking tests. Now, that would be loss of instruction time, which I suppose could be argued is time theft. And for those of you unfamiliar with that, I'm sure you can confer with counsel and they'll explain to you that, you know, it's something that companies terminate employees for because it directly affects productivity as well as profitability, which gets us to the point of testing, which would be the $1.7 billion that is spent annually among different schools in the United States to test companies for tests, which are meritless and baseless and groundless and in no way prove anything about students or teachers, so that's really great. Now, in Florida, we spend about $60 million on testing. That is, of course, not counting time theft or any of the other little things. Now, what's funny about that is we spend more than the state of California, which has more than twice the amount of students that we do. So I'm also going to suggest financial mismanagement could also be an issue when we're discussing these tests. We, of course, have touched on the EOCs. I don't know how anyone could even begin to think that forcing kids to take a test a month out from when school is actually over, which also has, oh yeah, stuff that's not part of any curriculum anywhere, and that is going to count for 30% of your grade. So you're basically telling kids you can show up for school every day, you can do your best, do all of your homework, do great on quizzes, do good on your tests, knock out of the ballpark with your projects, but you failed a standardized test. You're now looking at having a C or a D or an F. And of course, there's also the 9,000 some odd students who don't pass the FCATs that are now called something else, FSAs or whatever, and they don't get to graduate, even though they've done every single thing that you've ever asked them to do since they were in kindergarten. So, for our $60 million, what has Brevard gotten out of that? Demoralized students and a hostile work environment for teachers. So,
I'm sorry, ma'am, your 3 minutes is up.
Thank you.
Wow, quite a list of speakers. The board wishes to thank everyone. I do want to comment. I always allow board members the opportunity to comment after speakers, and I'm going to start off by saying I'm going to talk a little bit about EOCs tonight during board reports. So for those of you that brought up concerns or things you'd like the board to take action on, there is going to be some discussion on that later tonight. In regards to the trust issue, I'm just going to speak out directly to you, Mr. Schifrin, and any other administrators, that sometimes people just have to agree to disagree. It's not an issue of trust. It's just you just don't always agree. So it is not an issue of trust from this particular board member. It's just a disagreement. I'm going to look at other board members on the 18 items. I figure, Mr. Ziegler, you may have a comment.
I think it's important that when comments are made during public speaking, that incorrect assumptions are corrected, because otherwise it becomes in record, and many people believe that what was stated in public record is factual. We've stated over and over and over again about the Old Mill High, we don't own the property. We're not selling the property. That building could be torn down tomorrow by the current owner of the property, and we can't do anything about that. As far as bidding out release of a reverter clause, that can't be done because we don't know. We can only release the reverter to the current property owner. As far as benefits, I've been working hard to try and increase the amount and the benefit to the district and to the students. So some of these comments obviously are pointless. We have repeatedly up here said that it would be nice to save that building. I've even given some suggestions on how that could be done, but that is out of our purview to do any of that. If the community wants to step up, there are things that they can do, but we can't. All we can do is put a value on releasing a reverter clause. Thank you.
Anybody else? Mr. Craig.
First of all, thank you, everyone who's stuck around. I think Jada left, but if she's listening, she did an awesome job. I've known Jada since she was about kindergarten, and her mom, Bethany, is they're good people, and Jada, you did an awesome job, and I agree with you. Mr. Schifrin, thank you for bringing that to attention. I'll be quite honest with you, I thought that's what we agreed to, and I'm going to go back and relook at my notes and relook at what we talked about, because I thought that was exactly what we said, was that we were, it was the board's intent was to keep the practices open unless the individual school felt that there were certain times that they needed to be closed. So I guess if I misunderstood that, then I'll figure it out and I will get back with you, because we need to make sure that we're on the same page and that there's no thought that we're not listening to that recommendation. Mr. Ziegler's already mentioned the reverter clause, but Mr. Charbonneau talked about bidding it out. That would be wonderful. Unfortunately, we don't own the property. We can't bid out something that we don't own. I will suggest this, that if there's people that want to bid on the property, go ahead. I encourage you to bid on the property. It would be nothing more than that make me happier than to see someone walk in with whatever dollar amount it takes to outbid the current bidder, whoever that is. And to be honest with you, I met the man once and wasn't impressed, but it really doesn't matter who that person is. What matters is the legalism of it, and I have done my research, I've done my due diligence, I've researched the law, I've researched the precedent, and therefore that's the reason I make the suggestions and decisions that I have made along the way. There's no CYA. I'm more than happy to take responsibility for doing my best to get the reverter clause the most amount of money that it can, because that's all we own is a piece of paper. That's it. And if we can do something for our kids based on a decision that was made in 1976, I can't tell you that that was a great decision. I wasn't here then. I was in 7th grade. So, you know, that was a decision that was made at that time. It went through the legal channels at that point where it was turned over to the county, and the county then made the decision to give it to a nonprofit organization. They own it. The way it's going to turn out is that the reverter clause will still be on the property that they occupy, and that's at their expense, and that's all in the public record for the contract. IEP issues. I've been having a lot of conversation with parents over the last few weeks about that. As many of you know, I have a child with an extensive IEP himself, and I ran into a very similar situation for testing over the last couple weeks, where his accommodations weren't ready, and therefore when he thought he was going to test, he didn't. We need to fix that, and we will. That doesn't just mean the FSAs and EOCs, that means accommodations in general. And I think we are making some good strides with the ESE department and under the leadership of Dr. Theddy to making sure that and Donna Burberski to make sure that happens. And thank you, Richard, for bringing Vanessa's letter that was published in Florida Today today to the attention of everybody. If you didn't get a chance to read it, it was well written. I agree with her, and we'll be discussing it more.
Okay, anybody else? Okay.
I just, a lot of what I was going to say has already been said by the rest of the board, but I did have one question, and that was on Burton's comment about the non-discrimination policy. And this goes to staff. I'm not sure if this falls under Dr. Theddy, perhaps your area, but I know at some point, and if somebody would like to just wave and say, yeah, that's me, that would be great. At some point, there was discussion about that policy, and I thought there was being some work done on that to bring to the board, but I've not ever heard of any follow-up. And this is, I think, the third board meeting where it has come up in public discussion. And so I would like, we don't necessarily have to have it right this moment, but I would like to request that we have some closure on that issue and follow up with the board on that prior to our next board meeting, so that you probably noticed during that presentation, I was looking at Mr. Ziegler going, why are we hearing this again? Why do we not have any closure? And so I would like to have closure on that issue and have the board have an opportunity to address it. I also have significant concerns about the accommodations and the IEPs not being met. And Dr. Theddy, I thank you for meeting with our first speaker on that issue. There were several others that had concerns in that area. So if you could also reach out to them, and then I think systemically we need to do something to address that issue, as opposed to you know, we want to follow up with them individually because we heard from them, but I also want to make sure that we are putting things into place to keep that from happening in the future if we could. And I think that's it for me.
Okay, I've had a request for a short break. Okay. Okay, so we're going to take a short break. We're in adjournment.
We will resume tonight's regularly scheduled board meeting in approximately 2 minutes. We will resume tonight's regularly scheduled board meeting in approximately 1 minute. We will now resume tonight's board meeting in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2.
Okay, that moves us into the consent agenda. Dr. Bingley.
Thank you, Ms. Nisi. There are 27 agenda items under this category, 3 with prior information and 24 without prior information.
Does any board member wish to pull any items? Okay, John?
25.
F25? Okay, anybody else? Okay, so Pam, would you please move item F25 to discussion, and I will entertain a motion to accept the consent items with the exception of F25 that was pulled for discussion.
So moved.
Second.
Motion was made by Mr. Ziegler, seconded by Mrs. Belford. Is there any further discussion? Please vote. Okay, motion carries unanimously. Mr. Craig, F25.
This will be quick, and it's more a legal question. Sorry, Mr. Beislein, I didn't get this to you as I reviewed it again. And in light of some of the comments earlier, or my own included, is it my understanding that if this contract with the Bragg, if a different offer were to come in on that property, do we reset the reverter clause? This contract is solely based on the one offer that they have right now?
Yes, it's based on, it incorporates the contract that Bragg has with the developer. That is yes, we'd be obligated to close, provided they provide us with the funds, if that contract closes, and also contingent upon the city closing with them. So it's got a couple moving parts, but basically they both have to close in order for us to close our part of it with both entities.
Okay, that answers that. And then I know we talked about this, and I know that we, it may be a little premature because we don't have the money, but I want to make sure that there is a mechanism in place that restricts that funding until we can get the clear legal definition and the clear process of how we can utilize that money.
Yes, my intention would be that the money would go into my trust account. It would be held there until the board makes a decision what you'd like to do with it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, so is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
The motion was made to approve by Mr. Ziegler, seconded by Mrs. Henderson. Discussion?
Just one comment for clarification for the audience. The agreement for the funding was approved already. This is just approving the language of the contract. This is not anything other than our attorney has reviewed the language and approves the language, and we're authorizing this to be the official contract for the release.
Okay, any other questions or discussions? Please vote. Motion carries unanimously. There are no action items. That moves us to the information agenda. The information agenda includes items for board review and will be brought back for action at a subsequent meeting. No action will be taken on these items tonight. Dr. Bingley.
Thank you, Ms. Nisi. There are 3 items under the information category. Oh, wait a minute, plus 8, which makes 11 items under the information category.
I was going to say, wow, my screen looks different. Does any member wish to discuss anything on the information agenda?
I do.
Which, Mrs. Henderson?
H39, the change date of the workshop.
I was going to pull that too, because I just talked to Ms. Preston about that. We have to talk about that. Any others? Okay. Going ahead.
I just want to make sure that everybody realizes the date on that is July 22nd. It's very late it's not in early July.
Yeah, Judy said we can't do that.
So would you come up and help us through this?
Yeah, Judy suggested, she was thinking it was an earlier date, so we probably ought to go back.
Yes, I do apologize. I told Mrs. Nisi, it kind of caught me off guard. I was thinking it was the 9th, but it's June the 9th. And then it's 6 weeks until your July meeting, and it is on the 21st. That would be a Tuesday. Nothing wrong with still doing that, but we want you to know that you'd be having a workshop on a Tuesday, and week from the Thursday after that, 10 days later, we'd be having the public hearing. Or 9 days later, we'd be having our first public hearing. And we can't really change the date of the first public hearing. We wouldn't be very liked in the community because the county and the municipalities have to schedule, around us, so.
I say we stick with the 23rd. I mean, we have to do something. Or we could.
I agree. I mean, well, this kind of goes back to the point. Well, we don't know this specific. We have a pretty good idea where the window is going to be.
Right.
And so I think we can have a very fruitful workshop discussing things that should have already, at least we know, and we may not have the granularity of a specific number, but we have a pretty good idea.
Karen and I did speak while the speakers, you were going through your 18 speakers, and we did, to Mr. Craig's point, we always come out with a group of assumptions, especially at the workshop, and we should be relatively close on a lot of things. We won't have the exact millage. We won't have the exact tax roll, so we won't have the exact number to balance to, but from her perspective, she will have a labor run. It will capture the latest labor that we have for the units that are out there, and just a reminder, we do budget by individual employee rather than using any kind of averages, so their salary and the fringes will be as up-to-date as we can get them. And then also, all of the department school budgets will have been submitted, so all of their non-labor items will be entered into the budget, and those really, unless there's direction from the board for a reason, those really won't be changing before we go into the public hearing anyway. So a lot of the numbers will be cast in stone, pretty much.
Right.
So.
I'm good with that. Everybody good with that? Okay, so. So we're.
So we are going back to June. It will be the 23rd. Okay.
Thank you.
Just to make sure everybody's clear.
Okay, so nothing else on the information agenda for anybody? Okay, and I don't see anything under staff reports. There's no additional public presentation, so that brings us to board member reports and discussion points. I know I have 2 discussion points. They're not listed here. I want to talk about the superintendent search timeline and EOCs. Does any other board member have a discussion point? What do you want to talk about?
The out-of-area school-based that I sent out to you.
That's right, out-of-area school-based.
And then I also have a Smile Angel Foundation information that I sent to you.
Okay, you can do that during your board report?
Yes.
Okay. Well, let me start with.
Oh, can I add one?
Oh, I'm sorry.
And I don't
You
know
weren't
if this-
quick enough.
Sorry. Thank you. I know maybe it's part of the EOCs, but can we include in that EOC discussion the 3rd grade promotion as well?
Okay.
Let's start with the superintendent one, it's going to be the least,
That's what I was going to start with that.
just so you know.
You're
And we can get something behind us.
Okay,
Feel
let's,
productive.
in terms of the timeline that you each have in your packet, making sure you have it in front of you, Mr. Ziegler. The only change on this that I wanted to, first off, hopefully you've all had a chance to look at it. The only date change that I was contemplating was down at the end on the 15th. I know a couple of you have mentioned that you didn't want to have the individual interviews and the final interviews and identify who we were selecting all on the same day. I know I heard that from a couple of you. And I know, Harold, you and I had not talked about that. And so I was wondering, Harold, what do you think about having meeting that next day, June 16th, to identify the candidate to offer the final position to? So the board has had a night to sleep on it before coming together.
Do you know what day of the week that would be?
A Tuesday. The 15th, I believe, is a Monday.
Okay.
Pam, can you pull up a calendar and see? I believe the 15th is a Monday. Pardon?
I mean, what the key thing is that the individual meetings with the board members, we have that committee to work in there too.
Well, the committee, well, what I see happening on the 15th is, you know, the board will be scheduled to meet individually with the 2 final candidates. That'll be in the morning. And then that afternoon, we'll do our open interviews, and the committee will be in the background, taking notes on all of that. I really think at the end of a day like that, we need to go home and sleep on it and then come back.
I see no problem with having it the next day. We can certainly notice it. There's nothing wrong with that.
How do you guys, board members, feel about?
You mean 15, 16?
So change.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Can we make it the morning?
Yeah, and then come back that morning of the 16th, because,
The 15th will be a morning meeting too as well, right?
but it'll be a whole,
Well, yeah, but you'll start in the morning and then.
it'll go all day because,
Yeah.
okay.
But you're not going to start late. You're going to start
But we want to meet individually with the candidates before we do
in the
our group
morning
interview.
and then follow on with a special meeting. We'll have to have a time certain for that. We'll figure that out. And then the 16th, we can start at 9 o'clock or whatever you want to do in the morning to make your final selection.
Does that answer, because I know there were some concerns about doing all that in one day, and I didn't want to do it all in one day. Okay, so does this timeline fit with everybody better?
I do think that that's better. I'm still going to put the caveat in there that if the end of the day on the 15th, I'm not comfortable with making a decision on the 16th, I'm not going to be shy to say that I'm not comfortable making a decision on the 16th, because the last thing that I want to do is push this because we have a timeline. I think that's much less important than making a good choice for the community. The other thing that I'd like to add is I would like to see the committee join us on that June 8th for the public interviews. I don't know why they're not included in that.
That was my point as well. Thank you.
You're talking about the public interviews, correct?
Yeah, on June 8th.
Yeah, well, you know, we could certainly invite them. I think they were counting on coming back once more, but I think we'll tell them we'd like them to come back twice.
Yeah, I'd like to see them at both.
I want to see their inputs both in the initial ones and in the final ones.
I agree.
The other thing that I would like to request just ahead of time for that meeting, Harold, and maybe you can have this conversation with Ray and Associates, it is a public meeting, and I anticipate that we will have members of the public that are not officially members of our community I would personally like for those members of the public attending those meetings and observing those interviews to have the opportunity to provide feedback to the board as well.
You need to have public comment.
That they could fill out
okay,
the,
as opposed to just having a committee. You're going to have them do that on a piece of paper, though, right?
I would personally like, yes.
That's what you're
personally like
suggesting?
to receive that same feedback on a piece of paper if members of the public would like to provide that feedback to us.
Yeah, doesn't that defeat the unity of the committee? I mean, how are we going to organize that, or are you going to lump them in as part of the committee, or I'm not sure how we would do that and keep the emphasis on the committee.
We could certainly give members of the committee blue papers and members of the public pink papers if we wanted to keep them separate. My point is, when we discussed the committee, the discussion was that we wanted to limit that group because we didn't want too many people. And I don't think that we necessarily need to require that everyone that attend the meeting give that input to us. But if there are people at the meeting that feel strongly about providing input, if we could separate their input from the committee members, I think it's an opportunity for them to also have input and feel included in the decision. We're not choosing a superintendent for 15 folks. We're choosing a superintendent for 73,000 students and 9,000 employees in an entire community. And so I personally would like to see the input from others. If you guys don't want to look at it, you certainly don't have to.
I guess I just don't understand why we had the committee in the first place then, because it seems like it was completely unnecessary, because you didn't have to pick the committee because you would just have your input from whoever was here.
No, they are two different things. No, I hear what you're saying. I think my only concern is the amount of staff time it's going to take to make copies of all of them and get them out to us. So I just want to make sure, depending on how many pieces of paper we have, we know we want to have the committees, each one of us have copies of those, and goes along with that, depending on how many we have of the others, the turnover time to getting those to us may be, that's what I was sitting here trying to process.
Well, and I would be happy, if you guys don't want to deal with the paperwork and don't want to deal with the staff time, people are welcome to hand their pink sheets to me personally, if they, if everybody else doesn't want to be bothered with it, or let's invite the public. I have no problem with anyone contacting me via email or phone to give their input. The thing that I'm concerned about is I don't want people to feel like they didn't have an opportunity to give input.
No, you misunderstood me. I want to see what they have to say. I'm just trying to figure out how to coordinate it. So let me work with Pam on that, okay? Okay. Anything else on the timeline? Okay, so let me put that one aside.
Other than to clarify, you made a comment about 2 final candidates. Last time we had 3. Okay, there was no, I didn't want that to be definitive.
No, nothing. Nothing's definitive, not even my statement. Okay. Okay, well, I'm going to go to my second one, even though it may be the one that takes the longest. I sent an email to all of you and staff last week saying that I have not heard any repercussions of Lee County's decision of not counting the 30% on the end-of-course assessments, and with no validation of tests and taking up till December to have that grade counted in on final exams, what's the point? And so I said, what would be what are the penalties? And I think, Harold, I thought I copied you on it. What are the penalties?
You address it when you're ready.
Okay, good, because I said, I don't want to jeopardize funding, bright futures, scholarships, diplomas. I don't want to pull out the rug under any student out there, but I don't understand a student not getting a grade until December. We could have a student that's graduated and taking finals for their first semester in college and then not getting their grade. So please help me to understand here.
Now, Cindy Mann-Reeder and I have talked about this extensively, and she can answer the test type questions, but I could tell you what the consequences would be if we don't follow the law. You ready for that?
Yes. Okay. I'm probably not, but go on ahead and tell me.
All right, there's a state statute, 1008.32, State Board of Education Oversight and Enforcement Authority. And it says a lot of things, but I'll just tell you the part that I think is most important for us here. If the State Board of Education determines that a district school board is unwilling or unable to comply with a law or state board rule within a specified time, the state board should have the authority to initiate any of the following actions. Report to the legislature that the school district is unwilling or unable to comply with a law or state board rule and recommend action be taken by the legislature. This is now the state board. Withhold the transfer of state funds, discretionary grant funds, discretionary lottery funds,
Okay, that one's scary.
or any other funds specified as eligible for this purpose by the legislature until the school district complies with the law or state board rule. Declare the school district ineligible for competitive grants. Require monthly or periodic reporting on the situation related to noncompliance until it is remedied.
But they haven't done any of that to Lee County.
Well, they may be getting ready to do it to Lee County, you know.
Okay.
And you know, and another thing, I want to remind you that there's bright futures that Cindy can address about if the grades may not be qualifying for that. Also, there are other parents out there that don't have a problem with the testing and would not want to have their kids' grades jeopardized, I believe, by us not following what the law clearly states that we need to be doing.
Now, the flip side of that, now Cindy, you and I have talked, and you said you and Karen sat and did every scenario, because I know there's some fear out there. We heard some speakers tonight say, my students made A's, they really feel they failed this test, so they're going to end up with a D in the class. And didn't you or Karen, didn't somebody tell me that you didn't come up with any scenario where a student's grade went down by more than one letter?
That part is correct.
Okay, so I didn't dream that.
No.
Okay, so worst case scenario is the 30% did not lower a student's grade by any more than one letter grade.
Correct.
Okay.
Can I just give you a little bit of information that we did discover also as our team was working on it?
Okay.
For example, for history, geometry, and Algebra 1 last year, we tested over 10,800 children. And of those 10,800 children, 26% of them had their letter grade increase by one letter grade. We had 25% who had their grade decrease by one letter grade, and we had 49% whose letter grade stayed exactly the same.
So, true bell curve.
Mhm.
Okay.
And if I looked at the information on biology, we had 53.5% of our children had an increase in their grades because of their biology exam, and we had 7.59% have a one-letter decrease because of their biology exam. The other 39% stayed the same.
Okay. Have we ever had a student go down by more than one letter grade?
Ms. Nisi, can I tell you, have we ever? Not that I am aware of, but we have not delved into 4 years' worth of data to look for a student. We haven't.
What about this long delay of not having?
Here is our proposal.
Okay, please.
Our proposal is the biology one, the U.S. history, and the civics. Those are Pearson-administered tests. They're tried, they're true, they're reliable. We would like to continue on with the 30% counting for their final course grade on the 3 Pearson tests.
Were those again?
The biology one, U.S. history, and the civics. Those are what we would consider our older tests that we've used for several years now.
And they'll be back when? Will those be back sooner than December?
Those will be back on time. They're not, those test scores are not under question.
And they'll be, and what's considered on time?
I think it's somewhere right around June 8th.
Okay.
The last time I came before you and spoke, I talked to you a little bit about the Algebra 2, which for us was a new test. And on that one, we told you that the first year that we have done any calculations on first-year tests, we remained with the first semester grade, the second semester grade, and then outside of those 2 grades, we calculated the 30% and came up with the final course grade. Those were reported on their report card, but did not become part of the student's transcript or their history. So because we're looking at Algebra 1 and geometry as really a first-year test, because it's a new version, it's the FSA, it's a new test developer, our proposal is that we look at them as first-year tests. We remain with a first semester grade,
a second semester grade. That's what's reported on the report card. That is what their GPA is based on. And then after that time, in September, once the test is proven to be valid and reliable, if that's the way the state goes, then we will recalculate those grades, but again, outside of their transcript. It will not become part of their history. It will be for information only.
And that's for Algebra 1 and Geometry.
And the, well, and the Algebra 2.
So Algebra 1, Geometry, and Algebra 2, although they're taking it, it'll be for information purposes only, those students that are stressing, it's not going, so it's really not going to be a part of their 30%.
It will not be reported in their report card as part of their grade for first semester or second semester. It will be outside of that we will calculate the 30%, and then we will hold our children harmless.
Perfect. Okay, so this,
It just says they have to calculate.
Excuse me.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so they just said we have to calculate it. Oh, I like
Uh,
that.
Can you, I know I asked you this question, but I didn't have a chance to talk with you before, so I apologize. How do we translate a score of 325 to 475 that is on a sliding scale of 1 to 5 to a percentage of a letter grade? How does that work?
Karen's not here to tell us.
Well, it will be converted to a 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4 based on that
Right.
table that was created for you.
Right, yeah.
Just like your A, B, C, or D is converted to the 0 through 4. And then it will be averaged in at that point.
Okay, but where does that, is that a state mandated where those cuts are, or is that us?
That is what we have developed based on all the scores once they come back into the district.
So we have or testing has the leeway to adjust those numbers, whatever you want to call them, cut scores, to hold everyone harmless. Would that not be a fair statement?
Well, first of all, everyone will be held harmless
Well,
this
I'm
first
sorry,
year.
including Biology 1, U.S. History, and Civics.
Correct.
All of the state tests. I'm just trying to figure out how we get from a 3-digit numerical score that gets converted to a 1-digit binary score that now somehow translates to a percentage of a grade that is a 2-digit numerical score that corresponds to a letter grade.
They will do a ranking
That's
of,
on the Algebra 2 EOC.
they will do a ranking of all the
I was
scores that
poli-sci.
come back into the district. And that truly is a John Carr and a Karen Schaefer, how they do that calculation. But they look at what the trends have been, and they look at what the prior year baseline data that they have already accumulated. Now, Karen and John can give you the formulas and get into it very deeply, but I can't. I don't want to mislead you.
And I'm not playing devil's advocate. What I'm trying to do is understand and make sure that everyone understands, because this is kind of new, I think, to me, in the fact that we actually determine that scale. And what that tells me is that we have, in this district, in this room, the ability to work within the law, yet still get rid of that 30%. Would that be a fair statement? I'm not saying that that's the way I need to go. I just want to understand that that certainly is a way to do it.
You didn't mean get rid of that 30%. I think you're talking about the
No,
impact
not get rid of it. The impact, I'm sorry, get rid of the impact of the 30%, wherever that may occur, whether that's in May or September or December or whenever, right? I
Correct.
just want to make sure that I understand all of the intricacies of it. And I'm not putting you on the spot about one way or another. I just want to make sure that I understand it.
Well, and I don't think a decision happened.
But, Mr. Craig, we're not going to tell you that that there'll be no child that will not be successful on that end of course exam. It will be a reflection of the effort that they put in and of what they accomplish on that test.
Thanks, Cindy.
I think, and I hesitate to speak for my fellow board members, but for me personally, what I would like to see, Cindy, is given the complexity, the suspicion, all of the issues around the EOCs, I would love it if you and your team could work your magic so that that 25% that went down one letter grade went away. And the reason that I say this is because I don't have a problem with grades staying the same. I don't have a problem with grades going up. But when we're dealing with tests that we don't have the ability to see, when we don't have the results that we can compare and see what were they taught, when we don't, when all of these decisions are being made, I feel very strongly that if the power is within our hands to set those cut scores, so that our students are not hurt by the EOCs, then I think we should make it so. I feel like if a student is taking an EOC and they have done well the rest of the year, that work throughout the year should be representative of what they receive in the course and not that test grade hurting them.
And if I may comment on that, Ms. Belford, the cut scores, the scores that the students have been earning, those have been based on 3 and 4 years of testing and looking at the data from those 3 and 4 years of testing. And those tests have been proven to be valid and reliable. And I have to tell you that the response we get from the schools, pretty much we do not get a lot of yelling and screaming that these are not reflective of the efforts that the students have put in during the year. They pretty much tie into how the students have been doing. Now, we've always had the ability to look back at what you would see a child that has been a level 4, and then a level 1. You do occasionally see that, and you can go back and look at that test, and it could have been a numbering issue, it could have been something that threw that child off, but they have had the ability to take a look at that. They do get results after the first couple years on which standards the students are successful on, and teachers then do adjust and put a little more focus in certain areas. So they do get results that impact how they teach, what standards they focus on, where they put more weight in the class. And I have not heard a lot of children or teachers complaining that the tests were not reflective of what the children were able to do on a daily basis.
Did I hear you correctly that in a couple of years they are able to look back?
Well, if you're asking like this year on the FSAs, we've never seen those tests before. What I'm talking about is back when we started FCAT, it was the exact fear that we had. We had never seen the FCAT test. And it took us 2 years to see trends in data. And that's where what we're looking at now. And the state has said that we will hold our children harmless this year. School grades that said we will hold them harmless. But they want to establish that baseline data and give us a starting point to grow from after this year. We've not seen the test.
Am I correct in understanding then that if we want the baseline data, we'll have that baseline data regardless of whether we allow the score on that EOC to impact the student's grade or not? They're still completing the exams. We're still going to get that data from their performance on the exams. They just wouldn't have any negative consequences in their grade.
Okay, I'm going to try really hard to be tactful when I say this. But you do know that it has to be important to children. And they need to be able to demonstrate their achievements in their class also. So, you know, you have to judge if you were to tell children that it really does not matter. For some children, the effort they put in might be reflective of the fact that there are no results tied to that test. That is something that we have to think about, and that is something that has come forward to us from teachers. If down the road pay for performance is tied to student performance, That's been one of their outcries as far as this test goes also. You know, I think what we have to do, and I think what I'm communicating to you with the data that we have gathered for you, is that these are a good indicator of how our students are doing in their classes. And it's a good indicator of, in the end, close to 80%, their grades are not impacted negatively. In fact, some of them, it's impacted positively. So this has been working here in Brevard County. And why would we change it? It has been working for us. We want to capitalize on our successes.
Yeah, I just want to make sure we're clarifying. We're all knowing what we're talking about. Obviously, the new tests, yeah, these are ones, and as Cindy mentioned, biology, we're really good, you know, as it relates to compared to the rest of the state. And what was it, Cindy? I think you said 60% of our kids saw their grade go up. Now, if you take that away, just say, okay, then that doesn't exist. And again, teacher-made tests, I gave them all my career. To say they didn't have consequences, I once had a girl fail my exam and my course who lived 2 doors down from me. Rest assured, there were consequences that came from that. So I just, to say that they never mattered, it wasn't true then and it isn't true now. The question is, I want to make sure we know they're two very different. The new ones we want to take off the table and give information. It's up to the board, and I'm going to leave it alone, but you know, that we've had experience with these tests, and so I just want to make sure we're talking, you know, there are two very different things here. Is that fair and accurate?
I think she was next, and then Andy.
Yeah, so I'm good with us doing to Algebra 1 and Geometry what we're going to do with Algebra 2, because that just makes sense. And the comments that the parents are saying tonight about the children not seeing the stuff on the test, I'm hearing that over and over again too from my own children. And that is concerning. Now, if you go and you read the EOC information on the DOE website, it tells you that they're going to throw 6 to 10 questions in there that are field tested. Not sure why you would do that to a student when they're already stressed out over thinking that it's 30%, but that's a whole nother story. I am concerned, and what I want to make sure that from the research that I've done is that our teachers are teaching to the standards, and it's not the teachers. There seems to be something with the test. Our teachers are teaching to the standards. They have been given the information. They know what they're supposed to be doing. And of course, we also have the fact that, you know, 5 weeks before the end of class, they're taking the end of course. My daughter's still learning some of the stuff now, these last couple of weeks, what was on the test, because they had to take the test so early, which is, and understand the reason for that is because it's computer-based testing. If everybody were taking paper-based, we could all take them on the same day because it wouldn't matter, but now we have to shuffle people around, so that's part of that issue. But I just want to make sure that everybody knows that I truly believe in the research that I've done, and one of the principals called me today and said, you know, our teachers are teaching to the standards, and they are doing their very best, and there's just apparently some things on those tests that they don't know about, that our children don't know about. And that is very concerning. So I'm really glad to know that we're going to put that out there off to the side. That's good stuff, because the other thing that this does as a community, and I think as a board, and as FSBA and superintendents organizations and everybody else, it gives us more time to try to get this fixed again. We were very close in getting the 30% moved this year. I think that they need to revisit it next year. We need to talk again about having paper-based testing instead of the computer-based testing, because it just seems to, you know, we've got a schedule here from one person, you know, all these tests all over the place. It goes on for weeks. So but our teachers are doing their job, and the kids that don't know, and the kids are trying. The kids are working hard.
You know, Ms. Henderson, right now, our children know more what's on the test than we do.
Exactly.
Because we have not seen them. We've not seen any results, any reports, and all of that will come in time, but we have to wait for that data to come back to us, and then we can react to that. Right now, we don't know.
Okay, anybody else? John? Andy?
Most everything was said already, but of course, if the students are unaware of a fair amount of material on the test, we can't hold them responsible for that. I do understand it's a very valid point that if you tell students it doesn't matter and they don't try on these tests that we don't want to hold them accountable for, that's going to skew the results for future data. I get that, but you know what? Too bad. It's not about the data. It's about what's best for the kids. So unfortunately, I think the data is going to suffer. How do you solve that problem? I think the way the state should solve that problem is they should allow us to administer the tests, and we should reward kids for doing well, not penalize them for doing bad. I don't know if there's a way to do that, but they need to know what's going on, and if the data is not usable down the road, that's fine, but stressing these kids out anymore, we've got to do something about this.
And I agree, Mr. Ziegler, but please understand the unknown is always scary. It's scary to our teachers. It's scary to our resource teachers. It's scary to our children the first year. It's unknown to all of us.
Maybe our legislators should take the test before our fifth graders take the test and then see how it goes.
You know, several years ago when FCAT first came out, FCAT Science, they did just that. I'm not sure if you were here, Dr. Bingley, but they brought it in and took it to some realtor conventions, and they did do testing of our legislators and some of the adults in our community. And it was hard.
So I think we're going in the right direction, at least on this issue. Thank you very much for getting in the weeds, getting into the granularity of the other tests that we've been talking about. So I think we've separated into Algebra 2, Geometry. Algebra 1 is one grouping, and then we still have this Biology, U.S. History, Civics. And that's where I think Mr. Smith, are you still awake there, Richard? During your public comment, you offered your help, and I think this is where we could get your help. Those are three tests that I think we need to probably get a little bit more data on from teachers. We have the administration side, but I want teachers to have some input in that as well. And certainly we have time because none of these events and none of these tests come back before our next board meeting. I would request that you would go to your membership and to all teachers and figure out what they think is right. And is there a way to mitigate it this year? Do they want to write a new test? Do they want to, whatever. I don't know what that is. That's why you all are good teachers, and I think, anyway, that's enough. The other point is, totally lost it.
Third grade retention?
No. We'll get to that. No, I think that was it. Anyway. So I'll move to accept the.
No, we're not doing it. This is just for discussion. You had a third grade question.
Third grade question. Oh, yes. Third grade retention. Third grade retention. Is it the law? And I'm looking at you, but you may not be the right person to ask, so I'm sorry, Cindy. Is it the law that report cards can be used as the sole promoter of third grade to fourth grade?
I do not believe the report, no, that is not the law.
No.
Dr. Bingley, do you know?
I don't know, other than the statutory language has always been that the ability to have third graders promoted if they were not successful hinged on the portfolio. That is specific in the law.
Hinged on the portfolio or could be report card, one or the other? Or
The only thing I recall was a portfolio process that is specified. that districts use that to make decisions even if the child was not successful on the third grade test. That's how the district has always, because that is, at least that language is specific in the law. You might want to look to your left as to, does the language suggest that you can not use that and just say the heck with it and promote them on anyway. But to my knowledge, the specific path, and in fact, the Superintendent's Association argued pretty aggressively to still keep that as giving us the ability to have promotion when it looked like initially they were going to take that away. Cindy, I don't know if you know, I just know this, the portfolio is specified in the law.
You would want to believe that the grade on the report card is a reflection of what the student has mastered that year, which would also be documented within a portfolio if that was required of that child. What we will be getting back from the state regarding third grade testing will be a listing of the lowest 20% in the district, an alphabetical listing, lowest 20% in the district. From that list, we will distribute it to the schools, and then they will have to look at their students that are on that list, and they will have to make a determination based on that student's progress and mastery of standards that year, whether or not they are ready to meet the progression to fourth grade. But that will be a school-based decision with the teacher, and of course, Dr. Spadaccini will be here to assist if they need help. But that's what the report card grade should reflect, is the student's mastery of standards.
Okay, I think I understand that. And I obviously, thank you for providing that. I need to do more due diligence, but I appreciate that. I do remember what I was going to say there, Madam Chair, and I apologize, but it was back to Mr. Smith and that whole conversation. One of the biggest problems that I have is that I'm a firm believer that when you take a test and you walk out of school on this year, June 1st, you know what your grade is. That's fair. To not know until maybe June 8th through the mail, without a chance for a parent to sit down with a teacher and discuss, I think is poor practice. And so we need to continue to discuss that, which is why I ask you to figure out how we can maybe best alleviate that in some way. Thank you.
I just wanted to get clarification on that discussion about, we get the list of the lowest 25%.
Lowest 20.
Lowest 20% in the district.
Correct.
Those names are sent to the schools.
Correct.
The principal and the teacher together make the decision about promotion.
Ms. Belford, I would hope that it is a conversation. They will have to react with the parent if their child is on the list. There will have to be a meeting, a conference, a conversation, a documentation of what the student has mastered that year, and really a conversation about whether or not they're ready to go on to fourth grade. Now, mind you, there may be some other third grade students, regardless of their performance on the FSA, that conversation is already occurring in the schools. I just believe we have to trust the teachers and the administration and the parent to work together to make the best decision for that child so that they will be successful in the next grade, or again, will they benefit from repeating third grade?
And I appreciate the fact that you believe in trusting the teachers and the administrators and the parents to make that determination on the child, because I think that's very important. I just want to clarify, because I think we have been working under the premise for many years that teachers need to jump through about 1 billion hoops of documenting progress throughout the semester for students, or throughout the school year, for students that they think may be at risk of not scoring well on the standardized testing. So I just want to clarify and make sure that we're all understanding the same thing, that it truly is up to the decision of the administration and the teachers and the parent working together So if the teacher says this student has shown progress this year and I'm confident in their ability to move forward and the administrator and the parent agree, then we do not have to have a 5,000-page portfolio to prove that we feel that that student can be advanced to the next grade.
We would never require 5,000 pages.
I'm going to try to answer a go back for Mr. Craig's, because this is a question I asked when I arrived here, because we didn't have a third grade like you couldn't be promoted. And so I found that we did, and I asked about it, but, you know, and I even went so far as to get data from Lynn Spadaccini, and to my recollection, the portfolio was required. In other words, it didn't allow for, they failed the test, but I think he's okay. You know, there had to be something. But to my recollection, it wasn't like a really prescriptive something. And I think that's where teachers say, well, when a child's been struggling, I'm going to keep some things to try to validate that he's been successful on some of these concepts. But as I recall it, when I asked about it, the portfolio wasn't necessarily like you got to have A through Z. It wasn't prescribed, but it had to be something more than I think he's okay. I mean, that's kind of how it was defined to me 5 years ago. And so admittedly, I might be operating from that old concept, but that language still exists in the statute.
I appreciate that.
And I know that Dr. Spadaccini has put out some very specific memos to staff in the schools about what is recommended that they have as they create their portfolios. And you will find that some teachers will absolutely start the year with a folder for everyone. And they'll get the sense of their students as the year goes on, and they'll stop adding to that because they know that child will demonstrate mastery. However, there's others that, you know, they always have that fear that they want to be ready just in case, and they keep putting documents into that file.
And and I know you and I have had some conversations about this issue around the portfolios and that sort of thing. And my fear here is, I know that we have teachers that are out there looking at a list and saying, I have to assess this, and this standard to show in a portfolio that I could advance this student to the next grade. And so what I would like to get to is, if our teachers don't have to be assessing all of these standards, if our teachers can have a discussion with the principal and a parent and look at the grades on a report card, and it's an A/B student or a C student even, and they feel like they have a high likelihood of being successful in 4th grade, that team of advocates for that child can make the decision to advance them to 4th grade, as opposed to having to have extensive documentation beyond the report card.
Well,
I thought the portfolios went to the state.
they do not.
Okay.
The portfolios remain here in the district, but there is documentation of the data that's within there that the principal will sign off on and the teacher will. And I think usually an area superintendent will also weigh in on signing off on that portfolio. You know, Ms. Belford, my comment to that is by the time this list comes back to us, the school year is just about over. So as far as adding to a portfolio, that will not be happening in the last week of school. What's in there now, getting ready for the assessments, that's probably what's going to be part of that child's portfolio. And if you're asking me what is in them, I'm going to tell you it will vary depending on the child and depending on the school.
I think what I'm asking is for an agreement that that team of advocates for that child can make the decision without that extensive documentation.
And I would say that I believe that they have to have some documentation, and it's the word extensive that I'm just not sure what we're going to find. I can't answer to that. That's going to be probably unique to the student.
Okay, so the last thing I want to make sure we do here, because we've been all around the horn on this, is to make sure that we're sending a clear message and make sure we all understand. And as I understand what we've been saying here, is that students will be held harmless on first-year state EOCs. Is
Correct.
that correct? Okay. And teacher evaluations? Because if we're not going to put any value in that test, then I don't see that we can hold teachers' evaluations based on an unknown test either.
As far as teacher appraisal goes, I believe that's correct, Dr. Bingley?
Dr. Pace is coming down.
While the contract has not been ratified, we have already TA'd a hold harmless agreement with our teachers regarding performance pay, in that we will use the first part of the evaluation, which includes the observation scores, the professional growth plan, and the CMA scores, to determine who will or will not be eligible for performance pay once we finish ratification and negotiation of the contract. Well, negotiation and then ratification. At this point in time, we are planning to follow our current approved procedures for 14-15 in terms of the test that will be used for that summative Part 2 final evaluation score. But that's still to be worked out as we move forward, and depending on the validity of the tests, those types of things as they roll out over these next few months.
If we question the validity of the test such that we're going to hold the students harmless, I think we need to hold the teachers harmless too.
I understand.
Madam Chairman, please, we can't be negotiating from
Yeah,
up
I was
here.
getting ready to say, you're crossing the line, Mr. Ziegler. I just don't want to,
I didn't realize I was
think
negotiating,
BFT
I
on
was just
this issue
stating
would-
fact.
I just don't want an unfair labor practice, please. Okay, anything else, guys? Thank you. Okay, Mrs. Belford, you had the last discussion point of out-of-area school-based employees? No, and Cindy, I do think we need to have further discussion about retention. I don't think Mrs. Belford got everything she wanted out of that discussion. Maybe we need to have further clarification about how retention is handled at third grade and what constitutes documentation, that sort of thing. I just don't think we can have that. Maybe we need to have that as a board request or something, because I don't sense satisfaction with her answer for you tonight.
Ms. Nisi, if I can have Dr. Spadaccini forward you, she has provided a lot of information to the schools. I will ask her to share that with the board tomorrow.
That's what I was thinking was missing, so thank you. Okay, Mrs. Belford.
So the issue of out of area for school-based employees is something that came up at the last board meeting, and I sent an email out to all of you last week kind of outlining the schools that would be impacted by that, by our limiting students to only school-based employees, which were 7 schools total. I also provided you some of my thinking as to how I came up with the schools that I was recommending. I had worked with Mr. Theodore on that list and looking at what schools were associated, which ones were close, and that sort of thing. And I asked you all to take a look at those schools and the recommendations that could potentially be associated or considered school-based employees based on that reasoning, because you know your areas better certainly than I do in most instances. And so I would like to ask for some input on those recommendations and additional thoughts.
Start down here.
I'll pretty much state the same thing that I stated before, and I did read your work. It was very thorough. However, you address the option of a choice to a school that is not physically adjoined to the same property. And I thought through some of the ones in my area, and I don't see how you can draw a conclusion on that unless you wanted to just say the closest by distance. So I am still an advocate for adjacent property, but I don't think I would advocate for anything beyond that, although some may say, well, that's not fair to all employees. Well, at least we're moving a step closer, but I think we're opening up an incredible can of worms if you're going to try and talk about disjoint properties, because I do see the definition of a school-based employee on our property, and if the property is inclusive of other facilities, then that's still on our property, school-based. And I could make the stretch for that definition, but not to a facility a mile or 2 or 3 miles away. It's a very noble thought. I believe our employees are worthy of that, but I think it's just too complicated and opening up a can of worms.
No? I'm still reviewing it. I'm not ready to tonight. I'm sorry.
Okay. You might have to put me on a minute. Sorry. Okay, for me, there's a couple of things about this whole issue. One is I've got a report here from School Choice that the one school that we were talking about, Indian Atlantic, where they had 17 people apply. 15 of them were employees and 2 were others. 11 got approved. 9 of them were employees. 2 of them were 6th graders. We denied 5 employees and 1 4th grader. So if you change this rule, that the people who are not employees get kicked out, and so everybody else gets kicked out, and you're going to bring in employees. And I think that you need to think about that before you go down that path. That would just be me. There's some, I think that you'll have a fair amount of complaints from parents who get kicked out, and then you're going to replace them. That's number one. Number 2, there is a report, Dane, that is done in October. And what they do with that report is we have Ms. Archer's out of areas and everybody who's approved to be out of area. And then everybody, all the kids in the district are geocoded. And then facilities runs a report and it says who's left in the school that is either not in the zone or not on the out of area list. And we had 854 or 845 people in the district that were at our schools who are not supposed to be. One of them was Indian Atlantic, and that was 17 of them. If the school is already only 8 people over to make it 101%, but we had 15 people in there who aren't supposed to be there, maybe we need to be running that report and moving those kids out first because they didn't do the out of area and they're not in zone. Let's fix what's broken about it first, see what's left. Now, I did go through the list and it ends up there's not quite 8 left after there are a few issues with some of them but there's some people left who truly don't belong in that school. And we have that all over the district. So my recommendation would be let's fix that and see what we really have. Because then there might be room, maybe that 4th grader could come back and the other teachers would get in legally through the not being over capacity. The other thing about this whole thing, I was a little disturbed that we were talking about using capacities of the portables. We really do need to stick to permanent capacity, because I could have a school that already has 6 portables that now if we're going to use the portables, we say, oh, well, we got to bring in all these teachers that are right next door. I need 5, I have 5 teachers that want to come there, teachers' kids. We're going to need another portable, which costs another $100,000. I just think that we need to stick within the permanent capacity when talking about these, because that's better business to stay within that. Using it beyond that, for me, just doesn't work. So I would say that we really need to fix what's broken about this before we go down this path. And then, of course, my final thought on this entire thing is that I don't think that you need to, you should plan on changing this policy over the summer, because parents are going to feel like that you were doing it behind their back because they're on vacation, they're not paying attention. This is something that we start up after the first of the year when people are back in school, when they're thinking about where they want to go next year, when we talk about out of areas and that sort of stuff. I think trying to make this change swiftly over the summer is not in the district's best interest, and it's not fair to the parents. Okay, I'm done. Okay, that was quiet.
Okay.
I need to do more due diligence on it as well, because the portable thing is a sticking point to me, variety of reasons. But I don't doubt the veracity of the information that you provided, and I think it's right on. Just not comfortable making that decision right now. I think I need to think about it a lot more.
You okay with that? Okay, so is that the final board discussion item? Yep. Okay, that moves us into board reports then. Who would like to start?
I don't have anything.
Okay.
My report is going to be on our Central Florida Public School Board Coalition meeting that Judy and Dr. Bingley and I attended yesterday, and there were 4 points that I want to bring up. The first one is that there was conversation amongst the districts about discussion on what the districts call their end of year, end of course exams. Apparently, unbeknownst to me, there are a variety of different acronyms being used. There's EOC, EOY, for end of year, SBA's state-based assessments, and then there's also common fines testing, and it was determined that these different names of tests are confusing the whole general public in the state, and that we believe that we should have some commonality on what these tests are called. I don't think we've had any variance from the EOC, but I wanted to throw that out there. I didn't even know it was an issue, but it was a big conversation yesterday at the meeting. Another one is that, and I can't speak to specifics about this, and I don't know if Dr. Bingley can recall I can only take notes so fast, but there was conversation about the testing decisions. Was that there's some aspect of those testing decisions that's being made by the test manufacturer, AIR, and not even the legislature. So there's some things going on that nobody actually has a handle on with reference to that. And I can't remember the specifics, but do you recall, Dr. Bingley, what that was specifically relevant to? I don't know if it was test content or what it was.
Well, the allegation was that there was making up a test that had items that were not in the standards. And then there was some question, well, was it in the standards and we just don't know about it, or what have you? And that was what the conversation was about.
Thank you, which obviously lends itself towards students not knowing what's in the test. So there's alignment there. There was conversation for the coalition about holding their own ethics training. We need to take annual ethics training, which we do at the FSBA conference at the end of the year. And it's been proposed that the Central Florida area have their own ethics training as opposed to spending an extra hotel night at the hotel in Tampa and staying for the FSBA training as part of the conference. Of course, that's...
Is there going to be a fee for that?
They weren't clear on that. I can't imagine it being an expensive item whereas where we held an ethics training, whether there's 5 of us there or whether there's 50 of us there, there's really not a whole lot more expense to it, so it would be inexpensive if there was any expense.
I think they said there would be no fee, that the Orange County Attorney and some others that would be providing that. And then I remember one board member said maybe we can get together, throw together for lunch. But other than that, I think they intended to offer it free.
Well, then that works for me.
And it works for me too, and I just want to add one thing to that though, and I don't know what board members here have sat through the FSBA ethics training. I have done it twice now at the FSBA, and they bring down the state level attorneys who have sat on ethics commissions and bring some very scary real life scenarios to us that really make you think twice about how dangerous ethics can be and how strangely they can be interpreted, and how no matter what precautions you take with consulting with your attorney and making sure you got all your I's dotted and your T's crossed, you can still be held up on ethics charges despite your best intentions. And I did get a lot of value in that. At this point, to me, I don't know that I need that anymore, but I guess it would be open to each individual board member which route they want to get their ethics training on. The last item was, there was a lot of conversation about the FHSAA choice issue, which is going through the legislature, but I believe is going to die along with a whole bunch of other things that are going to die, and that it will be, it'll be brought back in the early session at the end of the year. The lobbyists that were there, because everybody looked at me because I brought this topic up there as I did here, and they looked for me for comment, and I made the same comment that I thought that that it was important to open up the availability of choosing a sport at their home school if it was not offered at their choice school, just like charter schools could. We would be referring to, in our case, West Shore and Edgewood, and that the state, though, was going a little bit too far in trying to make this statute so that they could choose almost any school, which then gets into crossing the line on recruiting, and I think that's a big mistake, and everybody agreed that that was a big mistake, and that the intent originally of the law, which actually is probably still written properly, and the lobbyists agreed, is that they should be able to choose their home zone school. There was so much agreement in there that it was brought up that maybe the coalition should support that position across the Central Florida area to agree that they should be able to go to their home zone school. But we need to, well, they want to research the intent a little more and bring that back to them to have that conversation. So all the Central Florida school districts seem to be on that same page about what's fair to our students in our world to be equal to what's in the charter world. So that's moving in a good direction, and a lot of consensus on that. It's doing the right thing.
Okay. Why don't we, since I'm facing this way, Misty?
There's an organization called the Smile Angel Foundation that is partnering with our schools to provide dental care packages as well as education to students about the importance of and how to go about good oral hygiene and oral health. And there's a ton of statistics out there that talk about the negative impact of not having good oral hygiene and good oral health for students, as far as missed days and inability to concentrate and illness and on and on and on and on. But Smile Angel Foundation is partnering with our schools to provide those care packages to our schools throughout the district. And they, in the process, are asking for donations. They'll be doing a drive over the summer. I'm going to go ahead and pass these down so you guys can have them. And I'll get some to Michelle as well so that she has the information and can hopefully spread the word on that. But I always like to point out when we have organizations that are reaching out to help our students, and they have certainly done that. So if we can help them with getting the word out and getting those donations in for our students, I think it would be great.
Okay. Karen? John?
Just real quick, I think we've exhausted the board reports the last couple times, and I don't want to belabor. There's a couple things, though, that I just wanted to bring up. Way back in March, it's been that long, we had the what I call the varsity, the Blue Angels perform here in Melbourne, and being a former F-18 guy, I know the commanding officer of the Blue Angels, and his feedback was as the first show, it was awesome, and probably the highlight was the food from Mel High on Thursday when they arrived, and that was awesome to hear feedback from him and from the senior enlisted. They thought that the spread that was put on was amazing, and all the students that were so courteous and served with passion, they were very impressed, so that's pretty cool. Freedom 7 is one of 2 blue ribbon schools in Brevard. Does anybody know the other one?
There's lots
No,
of them.
that got designated this year. This year.
Oh, this year.
Saturn. So there were only 9 blue ribbon schools in the entire state of Florida. We have 2 of them in Brevard. Pretty amazing. And nationally, there were 300. So, and that's this year. Now, there have been like 7,000 over the life of the program. But that's the National Blue Ribbon Program. Very impressive. I was able to attend that ceremony, and that was pretty neat. And finally, of going through the 50th anniversaries of every beachside and Merritt Island school and high school, since they were all built on the same exact time frame, able to attend, along with Dr. Bingley and several, Dr. Reinhardt and several others, the Cocoa Beach 50th anniversary celebration, which was pretty neat. Mr. Ziegler was there as well. And students put on a great performance. You can just tell that the Beach Pride, they have a lot of pride in that school. And one of the, simply because I still think it's amazing, I told my wife this, I thought it was one of the funniest things I'd heard, was when Principal Cool explained the fact that the cafeteria floor in Cocoa Beach is black and gold, and the cafeteria floor in Merritt Island is red, white, and blue, because the contractor over the weekend decided to put in the wrong floors in the wrong school. And even 50 years ago, we couldn't get it right. So that's one of those little tidbits that I thought was pretty interesting. But other than that, it was wonderful being out with the schools. I look forward to more.
Okay, before the superintendent's report, there seems to be some question about the open versus closed practices, what we approved. So I'm going to talk to Dr. Theddy tomorrow and write out what I thought we approved and send that out, just so there's not any misunderstandings. Also, for 2 of you, you will be going through your first week of your first year of graduation. See how many graduations you can get through and how many hands you can shake. So just know that your right arm, or whichever arm you shake with, will be a little bit more sore than what you're used to. So be ready for that, and bring some hand sanitizer. You'll be needing that too at the end. Comfortable shoes. That'll be the other thing. The comfortable, sensible shoes. And so I don't have anything. Dr. Bingley, you have a report?
It's the only thing I was going to add, that every year I say we're about to send, 5,000 of the greatest kids on the planet across the stage for graduation in a couple weeks. And now I feel really good about that because I have one. So,
she has one and I have
yes, they're coming.
That's right. That's right. So, and that's one of the best parts of this job is graduation. You're going to hear some of the best speeches, some of the best performances. It is really a highlight of every year. And I have to admit, I'm excited to see my youngest cross. He will cross that stage whether I have to drag him across or not. So senioritis is very high at our house.
Everybody go get some rest.
That's right. This meeting's adjourned.